All right, let's get it. Welcome to the stream, guys. It is June 27th, 2026, and today we're going to be talking about Litecoin. We're going to be talking about LiteStrategy. We're going to be talking about the Scrypt mining network. We're going to be talking about Dogecoin and Pepe coin. And looking at the timeline, man, I think a great conversation or a topic for tomorrow is going to be Bitcoin's BIP 110. And then a shout out to the dog fam, because again, we need better Bitcoin conversations. So shout out to better Bitcoin conversations. But today, the topic is really going to be Litecoin and a lot of the really cool, unique properties and the position that it holds in the market. The TLDR is that global decentralized freedom, liquidity, and capital of the people. But let's do a quick little overview of the market. So as of today, Bitcoin is cruising at about 60,173. These are coin market cap numbers, US dollar denominated. So yeah, 60,174 on Bitcoin, up 1% on the day, 0.93. Litecoin 42.34. So we're holding that 42 pretty well on the Litecoin layer. Litecoin's up about 0.76%. So it's tracking very closely with where Litecoin is. Gonna give a quick little shout out to PEP coin. It's trading down 1% in the last 24, but we have to understand the market cap 8.44 million, guys. So that's, more on that later. But this is definitely more of a meme coin layer play. So very much a culture coin kind of play. But I think they have all of the makings for turning this PEP project, the Pepe coin network, the frog network, into one of these more quest coin, culture coin kind of situations. So bullish on them. XRP is $1.05, up 0.62% on the day. Solana, understand they had a big day yesterday. They were up like 8%. They're correcting down a little bit. They're trading at 71. They were holding 69 pretty strong for a hot minute there. So respect and shout out to Solana. So a 2.3% correction on the 24. I'm not really all that surprised because they really outperformed yesterday. I think they were up like 8% at some point yesterday, which was relative to Bitcoin, because that's really what matters, right? Bitcoin kind of sets, it's the cantus firmus of the market. It's what everything sort of is best modeled with respect to when we're looking at like macro capital flows. And we got sticking the landing on this on Ethereum. Ethereum's trading at 1,578. Up 0.57%. So the markets are more or less tracking what Bitcoin is doing. So guys, Litecoin. When I'm telling you, why Litecoin? Well, first of all, let's do this. There will only ever be 84 million units of Litecoin. Each Litecoin is divisible by 100 million smaller units that we call Litoshi, in honor of Charlie Lee and Satoshi Nakamoto. Because if it's ringing a bell, there are 21 million Bitcoin. Each Bitcoin is divisible by 100 million Satoshis. When one Satoshi is equal to 1 penny, one Bitcoin will be worth $1 million. Similarly, when one Litoshi is equal to 1 penny, one Litecoin would be worth $1 million. But we've got a road to travel. But so 84 million Litecoin. It's got a shared UTXO, that stands for unspent transaction output basis, with Bitcoin. So that's super, super powerful. What that means is these can be modeled as discrete mathematical quantities that can be made to adhere to things that are like similar to the principle of transmissibility, or Pascal's principle, where 2 + 2 = 4. There's this determinism which allows you to build a lot of very, very high security, smart contract expressiveness. Ultimately, is where this starts to go, and that UTXO, as distinct from, say, Ethereum or Solana's accounts-based model and their Ethereum virtual machines. These are not UTXO. Accounts-based blockchains are not the same as UTXO-based blockchains. And there's all these really interesting kind of emerging state-based blockchains. Like, I'm looking at the development of HBAR, and I'm going, it's interesting. Some of these efficiencies that you can sort of bake into the validation. But I digress. So Litecoin, 84 million units. been cooking for 14 years flawlessly. There was, we've had some interesting events with the MWeb. My understanding there was a couple blocks that actually had a reorganization of the blocks, but that's the protocol healing itself. That's consensus actually going, hey, wait a tick, let's get this right. So keep a weather eye out there in the age of AI. But I'm bullish. Shout out to Loshen. Apparently, this gentleman, I think he's the lead dev for I think Nexus wallet, which is pretty cool. So shout out to that. If you guys don't know what the Nexus wallet is, that is I believe it's a mobile wallet that is MWeb compatible. So that's another really interesting advantage of the 84 million unit Litecoin set relative to, say, the 21 million unit Bitcoin set, is that the Litecoin set has the option of these Mimblewimble extension blocks. So in the same way that we know that Bitcoin creates a new block every 10 to 15 minutes, SHA-256 is their elliptic curve cryptography, whereas Charlie Lee chose for Litecoin Scrypt. So there's a little bit of that. Like we're trying to weave together a lot of things, and when you're discuss these things regularly, it's interesting because every day is almost like a snapshot of the flow in a stream. But all of which is to say, education is really the key here, by empowering our communities to say, okay, what is Bitcoin? Okay, why is Bitcoin different than a meme coin, even like PEP coin? Because there is a difference between a Bitcoin and a PEP coin. But I think what a lot of like toxic maximalists in the Bitcoin community miss is that there are advantages to the meme layer. Memes live at the fastest liquid layer of blockchain technologies. We have seen hundreds of millions of dollars flow in any given day in that layer. And so Bitcoin proponents of Bitcoin that are seeking to gain adoption, gain participation, do themselves a disservice when they disallow the opportunity for conversation with folks like DOGE. So that's I think the DOGE token. It's a project building on Bitcoin. It's like I believe it's not a rune. It's like an ordinal, I think. Either way, I'll do my own research more and dive down that rabbit hole, because there's runes, there's ordinals, there's all these things. But one of the neat things about these shared UTXO bases is allows a lot of the smart contract development that has occurred on the Bitcoin set to be applied to the Litecoin set and vice versa. Like we're right now, there's all kinds of stuff. Like, for instance, Bitcoin at the L1 is capable of 7 transactions per second. Litecoin, conversely, is faster. It's got a 4 times the speed of block time, right? The average Bitcoin at the protocol level has an ideal block issuance rate of 1 block created every 10 to 15 minutes. Now, what is a block, right? It's a publicly distributed ledger. So all that what's inside the block are all of the existing receive addresses that exist on the network, and what are the UTXOs that are associated with all of those addresses that exist on the network. And so that's validated every 10 to 15 minutes on the block on the Bitcoin blockchain. Similarly, in the Litecoin blockchain, it's about every 2.5 to 5 minutes. So it's about 4 times as fast, 4 times the supply. There's that silver gold analogy. So when we start like unpacking this from that macro, right, we know, or some of us are beginning to get savvy to the fact that, one, the dollar has a problem. We're printing a lot of dollars. And when we have, Larry Fink coming back from Davos talking about, wow, 2029, 1929, we're going to have to grow our way out of this domestically. There's only a handful of technologies looking at like AI, data centers, blockchain technologies, talking about a handful of sectors that we can expect to derive this growth domestically. And if we don't, we pay the piper of the printer just to service the national debt, which is going to clear $40 trillion before the end of 2026. How wild is that, guys? $40 trillion national debt before the end of 2026. Whereas only going to be 21 million Bitcoin. There will only ever be 84 million Litecoin. Now, here's another thing. One of the reasons why I really appreciate Litecoin is one, respect and shout out to Charlie Lee. Folks that don't know, Charlie Lee is the guy that released the Litecoin protocol on the world in October 2011. I think it was around October 9th, May 7th, or was paying attention to what Satoshi did with Bitcoin and said, "Hey, bet, maybe we can make this better. Maybe we can make this faster. Maybe we can make this cheaper." And by the time, so the Bitcoin white paper released Halloween night 2008, the Genesis block cooking January 3rd, depending on where you are on the planet, January 3rd, 2009. Already by the time that October 2011 came around, there had been some centralization of the validation of the Bitcoin network. And so when part of the original thought was like, imagine that with your laptop at home, that you can help participate, secure the economic freedom and liberty of all of your friends around the world, all people of the world. Oftentimes we talk about the Promethean fire of freedom that Satoshi Nakamoto lit on Halloween night with that white paper and the beginning of the Genesis block. And then we got Hal Finney running Bitcoin, and then suddenly, right, hop, skip, and a Bitcoin pizza day later, you know, yeah, crazy, and awesome. But so people are using these things called ASICs. That stands for Apple Specific Integrated Circuit. So you can build hardware that is purpose built to levy hash rate at the Bitcoin blockchain. Right. So then you got these folks that are just stacking this hardware. What does that do? It concentrates the validator set. If you've only got 1,000 people in the world, super Bitcoin geeks that start stacking these ASICs, you begin to get centralization of the validator set, and an increase in the cost to participate. And so Charlie Lee is like, can I make this more energetically efficient? And can I induce something that is going to distribute the validation and consensus, to bring it back to the laptop class? And so Charlie said, hey, let me use Scrypt, elliptic curve cryptography. That's SCRYPT. It's funny, a lot of people call it Scrypt, and which is right, but apparently it's the folks that develop whatever. Scrypt is. But I digress. One of the cool things about the Scrypt mining network, and so want to touch on some of the potential in the PEP coin, is that with the Scrypt mining network, you can concurrently validate Litecoin and Dogecoin and Bell's coin and PEP coin and like 40 something other projects of varying degrees of success and whatnot. But when we start thinking about the efficiency and the distribution and the security paradigm, because suddenly if someone's a big fan of Dogecoin, right, you can love it, hate it, I don't personally hold it. I don't hold pretty much, boat accidents, guys, I don't hold most of what I talk about, because the intention here is about education. It's like, what are these assets, and what can we do together, and a better understanding of what Bitcoin is at a protocol level, and people talk about, they use that word protocol, and like, what is it? That's like, man, that's a big question. Open source code that can be run where if you have the requisite hardware, there's nothing that stops you from participating in a distributed network. There's no subscription. There's no particular barrier for your ability to be a fully participant member in the network. So yeah, anyway, protocols, powerful. And like Nostr, right? Nostr is actually very powerful. That's notes and other stuff transmitted through relays. It offers something that's like a Twitter-like utility, but instead of it being this sort of, now it's private, was public, now it's X and all this business. But Nostr allows folks to create these social networks, and they've integrated Bitcoin payments. You can actually use Lightning Network Satoshis for like tipping and whatnot with content. And so if we can, when we start thinking, oh wow, I see where that, like, X is going live with X money soon, and what are they going to support, right? I I can take a guess at some of the initial ones that they're going to support. But it's a fascinating time that we're walking into, guys, and we got Clarity Act coming. And so Litecoin, right? When we look at what Bitcoin is and we go, okay, so with Litecoin, we essentially, and if we're very, very honest here, we get better, faster, cheaper Bitcoin with MWeb privacy. And when we also say, hey, look, we may not like the manipulation of large institutional players in the market, like say or I'm sorry, shout out to LiteStrategy, but like MicroStrategy that's now been branded to Strategy. You know, this whole Bitcoin Treasury company. Then we get Stretch and Strike, and above and beyond MSTR, and then we have Winter and all these things. Um, and Yeah, man, whew, man, how do we sensibly steward our communities through these realities together? Because there's very bullish things, for the space. When we know that the dollar in international trade is going to offer less of a compelling investment thesis for international trade, whereas when in a post-Clarity Act world, which I fully expect us to get Clarity Act passed before, say, November elections this year, because think whatever you want, right? Not levying an opinion at present, but the powers that be, the suits are paid. Citizens United is real, and there's an election coming up in November. And the present administration and the powers that be really got a lot of support from the cryptocurrency, blockchain, and Bitcoin communities. And so to me, it does seem to make a lot of sense that you would want your base feeling really good about life and prospects. Um, and I think Clarity Act is one of these major catalysts. For folks who don't know what the Clarity Act is, that's in the United States. It is a bill that will establish clarity, like what differentiates these different digital assets. What is the difference between a Bitcoin and a Litecoin and something like a meme coin that launches on a pump fund type platform, and all the various things in between, like utility coins. Like, for instance, there's distributed data storage and compute projects, which are really, really dovetail well with artificial intelligence and blockchain technologies, which themselves are also very there's a complementary synthesis there where they can exponentiate the value creation. And that's another big piece of this conversation. The Litecoin, the Bitcoin conversation is the Litecoin conversation, and Bitcoin and Litecoin together are stronger. They're more maximally productive in the value that they can create and in the liberty and freedom economically that they offer the people of the world. Bitcoin alone, guys, we are now encumbered with what Michael Saylor chooses to do with Stretch and Strike and whatnot, paying a dividend. Do you know 11.25%, I believe, is the current Strike dividend? So if you're a Bitcoin only kind of person, you're just accepting, fine, I'm going to DCA my savings every day, right? Maybe you've only got $50 at the end of the month. Is that going to get you freedom in the Bitcoin network? Whereas, think about this. For every one Bitcoin, there are 4 Litecoin. The average person in your phone, let's say, probably does not have the resources to pull 1 Bitcoin off a centralized exchange and move it into self-custody. Why would they do that? It imposes honesty on the markets. Shout out to Professor Oak Labs. Catch any Pokemon today? Bro, I don't know, but I'm sure those markets are flying, man. Shout out to everyone out there. Man, shout out to Lily. She's out there going hard at it. Shout out to man, yeah, just shout out to the community. Folks out there. And One Piece, are you seeing what One Piece cards are doing, bro? And like sports cards, man. Quick little side note on that. I'm learning that there's a whole hustle, like, bro, it's actually like underneath like a GameStop. So get this, you can use a brick and mortar situation like GameStop to take your Pokemon cards in and then get them rated. So if you respect it, keep it in good condition. And man, they got this whole waiting list thing on the card rating game. But that's the thing, you can increase in the resellers market a rated card. So I'm just trying to tell you, getting rich off cardboard. Exactly, bro. Again, like many of these things, I don't hold XRP, I don't hold Solana, I don't hold Ethereum, all these things, but I'll talk about them. And because it's about how do we help our communities make money, right? And so, amen. For folks that don't know, people are making a lot of money in these cards, man, in Pokemon cards, in One Piece cards, in athletic cards and whatnot. And I'm learning more about the hustle for getting them like graded and stuff. So sidebar, shout out to Professor Oak. They're really dope. They're always rolling through supporting. But yeah, man. So typically the way that I do these live streams, is I'll pick 3 to 4 primary topics. I try to cover them in the first hour, and then in the second and third, it's whatever comes up in the chat. So if we're like, oh yeah, Pepe or Snack or Bitcoin or Dog or whatever, or Pokemon or One Piece cards, if that is what the chat and socials want to talk about, then that's what the second and third hours are for. The intention is to try to get this out daily. I don't always make it, right, because we're creating in many milieu, right? We've only got so many hours in the day, and we've got friends and we want to build, right? And so sometimes I would rather, like, I'm trying to build, right, a thing for myself, but we've got friends out here, and having our friends succeed is success for us. So sometimes if I'm not here doing a live stream, you could probably catch me with a friend trying to, help educate and build value over there. But yeah, guys, so Litecoin, right? So macro on that is, if Clarity Act passes and then it creates that place where Bitcoin can become the primary instrument for international trade. That's the baseline for like all of these, right? We know that a rising tide lifts all ships, and Bitcoin, guys, it's like the ocean, right? And so all of these other assets kind of ride the liquidity environment of Bitcoin. And in a pre-Clarity Act world, we can, again, love it, hate it, rage against it, whatever. I think it's a problem, but Citizens United is real. And the way that our politicians, like say a Nancy Pelosi, the way that these folks outperform people whose job it is to invest in Wall Street is because the votes that they make, the laws that they pass, have an effect on instruments that are publicly traded. So if I say yes to this, an asset that I may have $1 million of exposure, maybe someone's even donated to my campaign so I can be a little more with my $175,000 salary. I can maybe acquire a little bit more of company XYZ. And then, I say yes to the law. My $100,000 of XYZ is now $1 million. Rinse and repeat. That is happening with the Clarity Act. If you do not fully appreciate that that's a very real thing that's happening right now, you're missing these macro ebbs and flows and highs and lows. And then we put on our Captain America hat, right? And we say, okay, how do we keep America in the driver's seat of the global economy, the domestic economy? We're disrespecting our dollar, though. The Federal Reserve, that printer is printing. Did you know we were adding $1 billion a day to the national debt with Iran operations alone? That's not everything else. That's not Medicare, Social Security, veterans benefits, yo. There are more than 1 million veterans that qualify for 100% disability. That is a big, big, big check. Typically, that's more than like a $3,000 or $4,000. And if you got a couple of kids, man, Anyway, so this is one of the reasons why we're going to be clearing $40 trillion in the national debt before the end of the year. And so if the dollar is going to levy less of an argument for oil, corn, wheat, major building and infrastructure projects, right? If we're going to build the Hoover Dam kind of thing, like for instance, I think 4 or 5 strategically placed large nuclear energy plants in the United States would be dope AF. Jobs for one, but energy sovereignty and security and independence. Man, looking at these temperatures out here, shout out to, folks in Paris and whatnot. It's getting hot over in Europe, but like thinking about like Arizona, seeing how hot it gets out here, bro, it gets really, really hot. And I'm just trying to tell you that if the power went out because too many people are running their AC, it's bad. If we can't get air conditioning going, people get in real like health distress. And so these are the kinds of reasons why thinking long-term energy sovereignty and security, if we did have some major installations that are capable of producing tremendous power 24/7, I think that that's a great move. But I've also shout out to Westinghouse and modular nuclear energy technology, big fan of it. Tesla has been doing great work with energy storage. But also remember they got the photovoltaic side too. So there's many different solutions, but we've got to, monolithic things have one failure mode, monolithic, right? So if you're Bitcoin only, you're accepting a monolithic failure mode. If something goes wrong, right? Again, like tomorrow, we might talk about, BIP 110 and DOG and whatnot. And these the TLDR on that is people want to censor what can be included in Bitcoin. They want to make it like only money, no things like ordinals and runes. That's really they don't like they don't like NFTs. And there's many different arguments, varying degrees of validity. And that's the beautiful thing about open source code is we levy. It is at the intersection of ideas that the finest fruit is often found. The Constitution of the United States of America could not have been written with a group of men that had all read all the same books and had all the same education. I mean, the beautiful thing about that time is, man, you got folks mixing it up from, educated in Italy and France and England and all over is Scotland, and these folks, anyway. So healthy discussion is important. So when we see some of these folks in the space, and we've seen this on a couple of different blockchains, but they're seeking centralization of the control. I'd be wary of that. I would be wary of that. So that's another thing, right? If you're Bitcoin only, then who knows what's going to happen? I think it's going to be just fine. At the end of the day, I think those that are modeling reality and game theory and the way things are very, very likely to go, not really worried. Bitcoin's going to be just fine, guys, is the TLDR. But Bitcoin is also the best positioned in the international stage to be one of those primary instruments for international trade. That can, as the dollar starts to lose its argument, Bitcoin begins to rise. But what's powerful is it is literally a knowledge journey away from understanding Litecoin presents all of those same opportunities to the market. But now, here's the one thing, though. Here's where, because of the size, because Bitcoin's at 1.2 trillion and Litecoin's 3 billion, it's much smaller. Like 3.27 billion. Okay, 84 million Litecoin will ever exist. There are currently 77.32 million Litecoin in circulation. The next Litecoin block reward halving is in less than 400 days. It's in a year and a month. It's July 2027. Very interesting. And then the next Bitcoin is in a year later in 2028. But yeah, so Litecoin, $3.27 billion market cap. Bitcoin is 1.2 trillion dollar market cap, which is much larger. So that's a couple of things. If you're a major international player, if you're trying to say, okay, like let's move with size, the Bitcoin layer offers you more robust liquidity. What I love about Litecoin, what Litecoin can be for the people that Bitcoin cannot be, it's a couple things, right? Here's a fundamental thing, right? On an engineering level, Litecoin can do everything that Bitcoin can do and more. It is more energy efficient with its validation. It is 4 times as fast. And again, we have fungibility and privacy options. It also has broad legacy integration. Litecoin has been, subject to organic adoption and exchange for 14 years, way before all this pump and dump era where you got thousands of blockchains launching every day, really just muddying the waters. So when we even look at like things like Monero and Zcash, like why not Monero? Why not Zcash? They're cutting off the off ramps for Monero. Okay. We often talk about the fundamental definition of a currency. 3 fundamental qualities define a currency. 1, a mutually agreed upon medium of exchange. 2, a store of value. And 3, a unit of account. If you have those 3 things, you fulfill the 3 fundamental qualities of a currency. And that first one is the hardest. Mutually agreed upon medium of exchange. So if you put all of your fortunes into something that even the powers that be in the matrix, whether we're on their side or not, right? It's as Jesus is said to have said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, right? When you're in Caesar's land, when you're in the matrix, man, you got to understand what maybe Agent Smith is up to, right? Now, granted, I've never actually seen the Matrix, so is what it is, but cultural osmosis, whatnot. But I hear it's right. It's great. But yeah, so for every 1 Bitcoin, there are 4 Litecoin. Okay. We impose honesty on the market price when we remove float from centralized exchanges. Float gives the option to be able to just update someone's dashboard when they bid the market. Okay, so, and what that does is when you just update a dashboard, if someone logs into a centralized exchange and says, I would like $10,000 worth of Bitcoin or Litecoin, if they have enough of that of supply on their books, when someone comes in, they do not have to actually go acquire those UTXOs and commit them to that address. Okay, they can actually decouple your bid and my bid by just saying, okay, Bill, you now have a tenth of a Bitcoin, or you have one Litecoin, right? But did they actually move it? No. They're updating your dashboard, so your little account says it. This is where FTX was running into all kinds. It's why Bitcoin didn't break 100K. That's why it's a flawed, when they say Bitcoin front ran the all-time high before the halving, da 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 da. Remember, FTX was the largest exchange in America, bigger even than Coinbase. And they were doing this. They were updating dashboards, but then funneling liquidity elsewhere. Centralized exchange still play the dashboard update games, but what keeps them not doing FTX is not funneling the liquidity. But by building that float in, by having these 24-hour settlement times, because not only, and then they'll play the spread. Why is it that when you want to buy your Bitcoin, it's 62K, but when you want to sell your Bitcoin, it's 59K? Right. So there's all kinds of ways that these centralized entities and interests and exchanges game the price. And they're there's all kinds of ways in which they're pulling out liquidity and manipulating what the actual price is, to centralized advantage. So what is the tool that the network has to enforce honesty, to remove their ability to play dashboard update games, 24-hour settlement times, and float? You remove the float. Okay. So sorry, I got something in my eye here. Eyelashes, bro. When you remove the float, they actually have to. So if someone comes in and says, "Hey, I want 1 Bitcoin," or a Michael Saylor level player says, "Hey, I want 1,000 Bitcoin," right? They can't say, "All right, let's tap the OTC, let's da 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 woody woo." Suddenly those bids, when they have to hit the open market, all that a spot price is of an asset, guys, is the last executed buy and sell order. So when exchanges are masters of the float, they can always basically set, kind of irrespective of what the underlying demand is. So you might have the user base of a major centralized exchange having an internal run, like the market's exuberant, right? But because they can capture that in the float, they can milk that in their spread, in the difference between the bid and the ask on their platforms, right? And so again, how we make these more honest is we remove supply. So that, because it's like if an exchange knows that they have 20,000 Bitcoin worth of flow in and out in a 24-hour period, just theoretical, numbers, round numbers, and they have 1 million Bitcoin on their books, they can say, oh, we're good for it. You know what I mean? Only 20,000 a day, we've got 1 million or 100,000 or whatever, But then as that float begins to match what comes in and out every day, they can't get clever. Right? If they only have 5,000, if they expect to move 20,000 a day and they only have 5,000 in a float, well, then they better start getting honest, because if they start saying, oh, sure, we're good for it, we'll update your dashboard, and they don't have it, they're not good for it, you start running into all kinds of problems. But that's actually good. If they're not good, if they're not rational actors, if they are doing these like what FTX was doing, they deserve to fail. And the way to keep our assets, safer and to impose honesty is, again, the self-custody thing. So all of which is to say, on a normalized basis, when we calculate a Bitcoin normalized unit, in order to do that, you basically just take the maximum supply of the asset in question and divide it by the 21 million Bitcoin. And then you'll know for every 1 Bitcoin, how many of this other asset exists. So then you get, and so for Litecoin, there's 84 million Litecoin that will ever exist. You divide that by the 21 million Bitcoin that will ever exist, and you get 4. Okay, so you go, okay. So for every 1 Bitcoin of that I pull off a centralized exchange, that's like me pulling 4 Litecoin off a centralized exchange. Now, when we revisit that enforcing honesty on the market, so now also think about this: GameStop and Dogecoin. When the people started to win, when the people used the instruments and the assets and the free markets that we have to compete against Wall Street, right? And when the people win, they cut you up. Man, When GameStop started winning, the suits got spooked. They couldn't play fair. So they called up their friends at the brokerages and said, do not let them go long on GameStop anymore. And that's how they stopped it. When Dogecoin was running, they were issuing letters, like threats with lawyers, to Robinhood, trying to cut them off at the on and off ramps. What's beautiful about something like a Litecoin is it's the game that can't be stopped. It is so distributed. It's available in so many ways, so many different crypto rabbit holes, event horizons, highways and byways of freedom, that it can't be stopped. There's no one place where you can stop the people from beginning to participate and enforce honesty on the network. And so the average person can afford 4 Litecoin. That's less than $200. I think it's about $172 for 4 Litecoin. And in that less than $200 purchase, you literally acquire a proportional equivalent of the total network as owning one of the 21 million Bitcoin. You become a whole coiner in a normalized basis when you calculate that BNU. And so when we understand, oh my gosh, Litecoin presents the people of the world an opportunity to substantially participate in an asset that offers all of the advantages, all of the benefits that the Bitcoin does as a technology, sans liquidity, but also Litecoin's very highly liquid. Litecoin moves more value on a 24-hour period than Bitcoin on many days, than many stablecoin projects on many days as well. So, Litecoin is just so powerful. But then when you think about that accessibility to the average retail person, and if our goal really is to empower the retail participants in the network, then, rather than being very egoic and, like toxic maximalism is flawed for so many reasons. Again, the only way to make Bitcoin a CBDC is to cook the Max Kaiser recipe. Could you imagine if Clarity Act passed, but it was okay, only Bitcoin is the only thing that gets the blessing of the state and everything else is not, right? Well, now in today's eyes, because people were talking about Michael Saylor and these kinds of folks are out there trying to push that, it's only this and that. Well, then could you imagine that? Great. So now every Bitcoin holder has no other options. Everything else has been quashed, so no free market. And now we're having to play capitalism with a 21 million unit finite set with a guy that brags that he can borrow $1 billion at effectively 0% interest. Is that why Satoshi created Bitcoin? No. It was to decouple money from state and from these very same actors, these banks and whatnot that the people are bailing out. We're socializing the losses and privatizing the profits. And Satoshi had a problem with that, and so, now, with Bitcoin, for the first time, we had a universal state of economic fair play, where everyone on the planet with an internet connection and a smart device can custody the capital that they create in a finite life. Furthermore, you can express that economic agency at all points of the planet. In the modern era with Starlink and whatnot, and shout out to the mesh network and some of these emerging capabilities. And when we understand that interoperability between these sovereign digital assets in particular, of which there are few, but just like a currency has 3 things that define it: a sovereign digital asset, an asset that truly can be spent at all points of the earth. Baked into that asset, if you custody that asset, you have the power of that asset. So like Bitcoin, no one can stop it. At the protocol level, if you are the custodian of those keys and that UTXO set, you can express them. UTXO stands for unspent transaction output. When you spend an unspent transaction output, it creates further unspent transaction outputs. So if you spend a $20 UTXO worth of Bitcoin for a $5 cup of coffee, you'd spend the $20 UTXO. It would become a 5 and a 15. 5 goes to the coffee merchant. 15 follows the mathematics back to your wallet, back to the person that actually spent it. So very fascinating. That allows you for parallelism, concurrency, a lot of advantages over the accounts models of, say, Ethereum and Solana and BNB and XRP. So Litecoin, when we start thinking about this, about the distribution of the ledger, the legacy integration and adoption, Monero doesn't fit that. Also, Monero has an infinite supply. It's very nuanced, but and it more or less tracks very close to Bitcoin. And then like Zcash, right, has that 20% built-in tax to like the mining network, right? So which I don't like that either. Whereas with Litecoin, people, what's it's so funny because a lot of people like to FUD Bitcoin, saying, "What if Satoshi came back and sold his million Bitcoin?" Right? So you got that founder's bags overhang, right? Whereas with Litecoin, Charlie Lee sold his bags, right? So we don't have that overhang either. And furthermore, it broke a lot of these cabals like that we have in Zcash and even in Monero, because Charlie Lee was like, watch out below, So it's very, very interesting, kind of front running a lot of what creates the very novel distribution profile of Litecoin. And that novel distribution profile, what it is at a protocol level, makes Litecoin the asset in the market that is best positioned to empower the people of the world economically, to do what Bitcoin was setting out to do. Litecoin, the 84 million unit Litecoin set, is the best positioned to actually do that. Because in a wild way, Bitcoin, as that first mover, is kind of taking the slings and the arrows of the institutions. It's getting the wrath of corruption, and the dragons are coming for Bitcoin. Meanwhile, we got Litecoin out there in the cut, surviving and thriving, and like in Bitcoin's wake, mightily taking all the poison of the suits and the lizard people of the world, and Litecoin's levying its liberty, and so when we realize Litecoin, first of all, superior upside multiples too. When a $3 billion market cap versus a $1.2 trillion market cap, radical differential. $60,000 for one unit, $172 for a Bitcoin normalized for Litecoin. Normalized base, all this. And so when you go, okay, so we can flash a network. We can. Man, and that's the thing, is the ability to flash a global liberty network. Why? Because the dollar participation, the ability to meaningfully participate, is not barred from you. And that's the beautiful thing. So shout out to Operation Litecoin Liberty. If you ain't heard about it, Operation Litecoin Liberty is any centralized exchange in the world acquire 4 Litecoin and move them into self-custody. This is not financial advice. It's all art. It's entertainment. It's education, whatever. It's all art and freedom of speech kind of business. And vibing, right? Do your own research. No one's going to be all the way, correct, 100% of the time. But these things are facts, though, right? 21 million, 84 million. We impose honesty. This is what we do. This is the knowledge we share that makes the people unstoppable. And that's why they fear things like Litecoin. That's why it's being suppressed. Right now, man, Litecoin is being suppressed at the centralized exchanges. Word is that Binance milks millions of dollars out of Litecoin very, very regularly just by gaming that, because there's so much supply on their exchange. And for folks that don't know, Litecoin was basically the stable coin of the cryptocurrency space before stable coins existed. Litecoin will be celebrating 15 years of flawless uptime this October, and Litecoin and Bitcoin 17 years. So it's so unique what Litecoin is. So unlike Caspa, right? When we look at the definition of a currency, that first quality is the hardest, mutually agreed upon medium of exchange. There are more minds around the world and that mutually agree that Litecoin has value, that mutually agree that Bitcoin has value. Not so with Caspa or some meme coin that launched today, or, oh, wow, HBAR. Well, that's okay. Well, great. But you know what I mean? And so that matters. That mutually agreed upon medium of exchange is, one of those 3 fundamental qualities of a currency, but then, store of value, unit of account, which we get with the Bitcoin set, the Litecoin set. So something like an Operation Litecoin Liberty, if you got 100,000 people, around the world to go, okay, bet, boom, I'll pull off 4 Litecoin off an exchange. Think about what that would do, right? There's only 84 million, first of all, So if you had 100,000 people each buying 4 Litecoin, that's suddenly 400,000 Litecoin that just jump. That's less manipulation on the market. And think about that. You're not asking them to go like sell a kidney and go to the. It's something that the most retail people can actually do, can actually achieve. And that's the thing, man. Is It's the notion of like $5 to freedom or $50 to freedom or $500 to freedom. I'm not saying that is rational or easy or should be expected for many reasons. No, the like when you hear these folks talking about 50x, 100x, do they exist? Yes. Are they often manipulated? Right? Like when we look at like the Solana ledger, the Ethereum ledger, man, many reasons I don't hold them, right? Infinite supply, right there. First, you're right. There are two like primary filter criteria. When if anyone asks me about any project, I say, does it have a hard cap supply and is it UTXO based? If it's UTXO based, that means I can talk to Bitcoin with it. I can flow my capital to Bitcoin with it, and with the maintenance of security, custody, all these cool things, right? Whereas if it's accounts and EVM, I've got to cross a Rubicon of technology and mathematics. I've got to leave the power of UTXO and go into the land of trust me, bro. And trust me, bro, is where people get smoked, bro. You know what I mean? That's where typically all these hacks and whatnot, they occur on EVM and accounts based blockchains. Now to that point, I also want to shout out LitecoinVM. But here's the other thing, man. Litecoin is so uniquely positioned. When we look at one, we've got LitecoinVM bringing an EVM style smart contract express stuff. So here, even as one who's levies criticisms against some of that technology stack, the reality is the market is largely adopted and has confidence in this technology. They're willing to make those risk trade-offs, right? So like Solana at $40 billion, whether I agree with it or not, people are there, right? It's like Ford versus Chevy in religions, people are, it exists. So as a baseline, Litecoin VM can have success in the market. Its technology choice is not going to bar it from participation. But here's where immediately it levies a superior argument to Ethereum and Solana, and even and these other sort of secondary layer cannibalism situations, is that it at the base of the pyramid of how LitVM is building is the 84 million Litecoin. Whereas there's an infinite number of Ethereum, there's an infinite number of Solana. There's no way to rationally model, okay, if I acquire so many Ethereum and Ethereum network is valued at so many billions or trillions of dollars in X number of years, how much will my position be worth? Unlike the 21 million Bitcoin or 84 million Litecoin, devoid of a supply cap that limits you cannot reliably predict what 21 millionth is. Whereas on the Bitcoin side, I can tell you exactly, or the Litecoin side, I can tell you exactly what a 1,000 Litecoin is worth at a $1.5 trillion Litecoin valuation in some number of years, and so there's a lot of advantages with the LitVM, because also they are able to apply the learnings of the Ethereum virtual machine, the Solana virtual machine. They're also, my understanding is they're baking in some really cool zero knowledge, sort of cryptography, that will actually allow some really neat scaling options. So very, very fascinated with what LitVM is bringing, and with EVM style capability to the Litecoin set. But get this, guys, you've got something like Cardano, right? 45 billion Cardano ADA. They're offering UTXO based DeFi as well. So that's another unique value proposition of the Litecoin set. And this actually occurred to me just like a couple days ago. It's like, oh my gosh, Litecoin is going to have two smart contract options. It actually is giving me chills. I have literal chills thinking about like, whoa, people are going to be able to optionally express their 84 million Litecoin UTXO set with MWeb privacy and fungibility, the EVM style route with LitVM, and instantly be able to, and think about this, a lot of Ethereum devs and BNB devs, if y'all aren't keeping up with what's cooking on LitVM, that testnet is going wild, bro. Because think about that. Especially if you've developed and you've had success in early wave like Ethereum adoption, and you may have a chance at another crack at that. And again, look at the Litecoin market cap, 3.28 billion. Let's look at Ethereum, 190 billion. Right? So the 2x, to get your 2x in Litecoin, you go from 3 billion to 6, whereas Ethereum's got to go from damn near 200 billion to 400. And like Bitcoin has to go from 1.2 trillion to 2.4, right? So when we also start thinking about these, right, why would developers be really excited about, hey, building smart. Could you imagine if Bitcoin had just smart contracts? If you go, nah, like we don't need Ethereum, we don't need da 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 da. We're going to be able to do lending and borrowing, collateralize our Bitcoin, get stable coins, yield 14%, 20. You know what I mean? 8%. 8% right now. Just does seem to be a pretty solid, reliable yield using the spectrum of various stable assets. Let's say. So when we start thinking that Litecoin might have that. Get this, guys. Tether was the most profitable company in the world per employee. They were making about $1 billion per, and they had about 100 employees at the time in a year. So think about that. And all Tether's business model is, guys, they take that 1 or 2%. When you go from Ethereum to Tether, to Solana to Tether, to Fartcoin to Tether, to Dogecoin to Tether, whatever it is, right? So when you see that, and that's $1 billion per employee, and you're looking at a market cap of 3 billion for the entire Litecoin network, what happens when you strap that kind of stable coin expressiveness and options? Man, perpetuals, bro. Someone's already going live. Well, not live, but it's in the LitVM testnet. They're clicking keys, bro, creating Strike, not Strike perpetuals. Shout out to Strike on Cardano. That's the EUTXO side. But think about that positioning of what Litecoin is. Litecoin is going to be able to access smart contracts through the Cardano set and access things like Strike perpetuals, and they're going to be able to go through the LitVM set. But what's really powerful about LitVM is, right, it immediately inherits a lot of where Ethereum and BNB, the current state, and Solana, what is the current state of development and implementation? Like, give me choices. I believe in free markets and free minds, right? Competition is good when we can get it. That's why these banks are scared. The last thing banks want is a free market competition. What's powerful about these technologies is implicit in them is an unstoppable free market, is what it is. Like, get this, man. There was some state in America where you could not have a man and a woman couldn't lay with each other with their socks on. Weird stuff like this. The point that I'm making, though, is just because some old boomer in a wig or whatever, like in the UK, they trying to do all kinds of crazy stuff to UK citizens. But at the end of the day, it's dusty old folks saying you can't. But the math still works, bro. Is what it is, right? Can't stop it. You cannot stop it. And that's the power of Bitcoin. And when you realize Bitcoin's not alone, baby. Bitcoin's got the 84 million Litecoin. And then we talk about the Monero set and the Zcash set. We talk about how, oh my gosh, right? And that is what actually begins to liberate what Bitcoin is. But what the power of Litecoin is, of all assets that exist, it is the asset that provides the full spectrum of optionality for the people to rally behind and boom, take the power, right? If we at Monero, we can't do that. We can't boom, take the power at the centralized exchanges because they're attacking us there. Litecoin lives there. Zcash, 20% development, tax. Nah, it's not dead. It's not like Zcash doesn't levy or whatever, but that is a real thing. You accept it, right? So when boom, take the power, we got to go, oh, well, we got to pay whoever. Litecoin doesn't have that, guys. So when you realize, oh my gosh, how many people wouldn't want to have one Bitcoin? Even at $60,000, and again, shout out to everyone rolling through. Shout out to Professor Oak. Shout out to shout out for the thumbs up, bro. Please do like, subscribe, share with your friends, and all that. We are talking Litecoin. We're gonna coloring in on LitVM. Want to talk about LiteStrategy relative to MicroStrategy? For folks who don't know, there is a there's actually two publicly traded companies that I know of. One is called Lits. That's the ticker. LITS. That's LiteStrategy. What's really cool, they used to be My Pharma, and their ticker was MEIP. So they are a revenue positive company that is acquiring Litecoin and putting it on their balance sheet. That's the number one thing that Strategy has really, really messed up with their model. Like when it was MSTR, and then it went to all this whole fiat industrial complex. Bitcoin treasury companies, Litecoin treasury companies are not invalid, but you need to be a revenue positive company. If you're borrowing and creating debt, you're disrespecting the intention of at the very least what Satoshi was doing with Bitcoin, and that wasn't to give banks with preferred lending advantages over the retail the ability to acquire and outcompete the people that the asset is supposed to be freeing. you know. And again, when we realize that interoperability between them is what keeps Bitcoin free. You know, there's all kinds of stuff, and actually allows it to fulfill its intention. But yeah, so with that Litecoin set, more people have $200 in their pocket. More people can pull for Litecoin off of these exchanges and then force the price to be more honest. You know, I think shared goals are so important. So these are some of the things that the Litecoin community really needs, right? We need more content creators talking about it, you know. And I know it's an uphill battle because you got like Binance, you got a lot of centralized exchanges, word is, that are milking it, suppressing it because it's a cash cow for them. They're like, yeah, bro, more value does flow through the Litecoin layer than most of these other blockchains. It just quietly actually works, you know. And if you got a cash cow, you don't want to lose that. So you don't want the people to suddenly be like, and the powers that be in the suits, they don't want the people to rise. They don't want the people to have power, right? And so that's the thing. If you want to have a meaningful participation in the Bitcoin network, you know, on a unit for unit basis, $60,000 is 1 unit of honesty to say, the people take the power, you know, whereas $200 on Litecoin, right? So being able to get 1,000 people that are coordinating, going, huzzah, and pulling for Litecoin, and then thus impacting the spot price. Okay, because remember, the spot price is just the last executed buy and sell order. So if these centralized exchanges start getting hit with for Litecoin, for Litecoin, for Litecoin, for Litecoin, what ends up happening is, as a community, we start celebrating our roadmap of freedom and success and liberty, right? Because we know we got to retake $50. And then once we're at 50, 69. Why? For the culture. After we're at 69, 100, 3 digits. Very, very powerful. After 100, all-time high. Litecoin, that's about $386. But of course, we set it at 420. Why? For the culture. Once we're at 420, 1,000, bro, right? And then after that, the 999 memes come out, right? But that shared path to success, that is a piece of our GameStop ladder. You know, that shared joie de vivre, celebration, those kinds of goals. So when we have in our head, okay, Operation Litecoin Liberty is take 4 Litecoin from any centralized exchange, does not matter, move it into self-custody. You are imposing honesty on the market. That is 4 less Litecoin that Binance or Coinbase or Bybit or any of these. I'm not trying to pick on anyone, you know, but that's 4 less that they can manipulate. That's 4 less, oh, we're good for it. And think about it. You can impose an equal unit of honesty that cost you $60,000 on the Bitcoin set, only $200 on the Litecoin set. So the people of the world can force the powers that be to start valuing the market, you know, the assets honestly, because we can control the bid a lot easier with the Litecoin set, because we need less, right? 3 billion market cap, guys, right? Versus 1.2. You know, a lot easier to come up with 3 billion than it is 1.2 trillion, you know? And so yeah, man, I'm super, super bullish on that. And these are the kinds of conversations, because this really does apply, that Operation Litecoin Liberty, it really applies very well with assets that have hard cap supplies. Because you can literally put numbers on, this is what it means to acquire this many units, right? Whereas the ones with infinite supply, like Ethereum or Solana, or, you know, or even Monero. But again, Monero is kind of a special case because you can kind of asterisk it, because it's built to track very close to Bitcoin's issuance rate. So Bitcoin's going to issue the 21, it'll asymptotically approach the 21 million unit Bitcoin in circulation in the year 2140. Right, so more than 100, like about 120 years from now. Okay, so in 120 years, Monero is set to be about 21 million. But unlike Bitcoin that limits it at that, Monero is allowed to keep going. So while it is theoretically infinite, its issuance rate is similar. It follows a similar shape curve, just without that asymptote, without that finite limit that it can't, you know, cross. But so when you calculate that Bitcoin normalized unit, you know, maximum supply divided by 21 million, you can then as a community go, oh wow. So we, you know, it's like GameStop and Dogecoin, guys. Again, that's why I say Litecoin is the game that can't be stopped. because it touches everywhere. You can make Litecoin and Bitcoin into anything, and because of that accessibility, because of that expressiveness, that's another reason why it's perfectly positioned to unite Ethereum and Solana and XRP and Bitcoin and everybody. If everyone that was participated in NFTs and whatnot and all these various meme coins, bro, we're like, okay, if we're going to run this up together, if we're going to use Litecoin, I mean, again, that's why I call it decentralized freedom, liquidity, and freedom capital, is because it doesn't have to stay Litecoin, right? It's just like any investment, bro. You make an investment of whatever, and then it grows, and you go, hey, you know what? I want to go buy a house, right? So you sell off a little bit of that investment, and you go buy a house, let's say. So if Litecoin serves as that decentralized freedom, liquidity, freedom capital, whether you're building on Ethereum, one, you're supporting culture, right? You're supporting freedom and liberty for the people, so that's good. And then as you walk up and enjoy that success as a community, you can then choose in a free market to use some Silent Swap, Houdini Swap, Thor Swap, Leodex, Thorchain. I mean, there's myriad, all of the different open source free market tools. Shout out to Ruggiero Network. Shout out to Maya Protocol. There's just so many. There's so many ways to go from one to the other. So really, it's about having a network of people that are like, hey, look, we have the opportunity to literally take the reins of this asset before the suits can control it. And yet it has this deep penetration and power that none of these other things can be. If we launched a brand new project, even it had everything we would ever want it to be, the distribution profile, right? Because then, of course, the suits are going to go, nope, right? They're going to stop it before it gets in, whereas Litecoin's already in, which is why I think we see so much manipulation from centralized exchanges, and we see such hard PR from like Bitcoin maximalists and all this stuff, for myriad reasons. Especially as Bitcoin becomes more captured, they don't want to interrupt their power. So if you really are about power to the people, you don't want Bitcoin being the only privileged asset and everything else, And if you really understand game theory and how to create sane models, scalable algorithmic Nash equilibrium, because here's the thing, there is a state called Nash equilibrium. It's a beautiful state, right? If you ever seen the movie A Beautiful Mind, that's talking about this John Nash, the mathematician that. So Nash equilibrium, among many things, is a state in which all players in a game, in pursuit of their own interests, are maximally advantaged commensurate with their skill and their available move set. Okay, so like if you got 100 players playing chess defines the rule set as well as the reset rate of the cadence. So if these 100 players were occupying a state of Nash equilibrium, they would arrange themselves really according to their skill set, their skill and available move set. The move sets are more or less shared and they reset periodically. Therefore, the determinant variable is how good are you at a shared game. A shared game can be making money in an economy, global freedom, okay? And when Bitcoin is the available move set, it is not maximally productive or freedom inducing. Whereas when you expand the available move set to be the 21 million Bitcoin, the 84 million Litecoin, everyone in the Bitcoin layer has an arbitrage against Sailor. Because think about that. If we know the dollar is dirty, we know the dollar's got to get printed into oblivion or whatever. I was going to say Bolivian. This is just funny because anyway. If we know that, right, why would you, if you're arbitraging against the dollar, sell your Bitcoin for dollars, right? Or if you're arbitraging against institutional manipulation because it's tax season, so Sailor and the suits are gonna, or Nancy Pelosi and they're all passing a law, so now everybody in Bitcoin's got to ride their BS wave. You could go, okay, bet, right? I'm gonna sell and miss me with that, but right. Why sell for an inflating asset that is fundamentally unsound when you can use these non-KYC crypto rabbit holes, freedom holes, and event horizon, all this kind of stuff, to go from the Bitcoin set to the Litecoin set, because you can do that. So you can lock that capital, maintain all of the expressiveness you had with the Bitcoin set, but now you've got Litecoin and MWeb privacy. And at any moment, you can flow right back, because that is really the way that the people win, right? So if Bitcoin is at a right, you could theoretically migrate some of that value to the Litecoin set. If you're right and Bitcoin corrects down, then I go from my Litecoin set, back to the Bitcoin set, and I acquire now more Bitcoin because I've used the hard cap supply, all of these shared qualities that Bitcoin has. I was able to defend myself in the Litecoin set, and then when I got my discount, boom, shout out to Xander's IS. Guys, I'm gonna quick comment on that. I'm excited for that, guys. There's a big, for folks that do not know, man, we got a crazy fight happening tonight. Boots Ennis, Xander's IS. Xander, 23, undefeated. I think he's around a 23-0-ish kind of record. Boots Ennis, I think he's like 35-0, 31 knockouts. Man, it's going to be crazy. 28 years old. But anyway, I'll cover that later. I'm just very excited. I think that's why I was using these, boxing analogies. But yeah, guys. So Litecoin and Bitcoin together, that is the liberty and freedom, and by educating, going, oh wow, that kind of right, because doesn't that make more sense? If you know that institutions are going to manipulate Bitcoin, why sell into fiat? Which also, right, like especially if you're moving with any kind of size, these banks, you try to move more than like what, 5, 10, whatever $1,000, they will shut your account off, right? Whereas using interoperability between UTXO-based blockchains, you can move $1 billion from the Bitcoin set to the Litecoin set. You could go from Bitcoin to Litecoin to Zcash to Monero. And think about that. From Bitcoin to Litecoin to Zcash to Monero, now you've also got privacy. Guess what else you get with Zcash? The Winklevi twins, guys, are billionaires. They own an exchange, Gemini. For folks that are missing it, Zcash will be a platinum collateral project. Imagine this. You're part of the billionaires. Why art, right? When you collateralize assets and borrow against them, it's not a taxable event in many jurisdictions. So if you're a billionaire, let's say like the Winklevoss twins, and you guys go, hey, to your network of billionaires, and you go, see the Zcash? What do you want in a collateral? You want it to maintain its value or increase? Zcash, there's only 21 million. It's basically Bitcoin with zero knowledge cryptography on it, okay? Billionaires are going to, if they're very smart, and think about the returns. If they walked it up $100 every 6 months, 500, 600, or even every year, think about those returns. Less than $1,000, and then when it gets to 1,000, adding $1,000, it will become a platinum collateral project where billionaires know, bet, dude, I take that Zcash, boom, and again, it's UTXO based, guys. It speaks Bitcoin and Litecoin and Monero and Cardano, guys. The freedom rabbit holes of if you want to access stable coins, if you want to get yield, lending and borrowing, if you want to get more privacy, all of it. If you're in America and you want to buy a house, guess what you can now do? Bitcoin-backed mortgages are real. So imagine you're a Monero whale, but they're trying to attack your Monero. They don't like your freedom. Well, with Houdini swap, Silent swap, Thor swap, all these things, if you got Monero bags, there is no one on this earth that can stop you from migrating those UTXOs from the Monero UTXOs all the way over to the Bitcoin, and then boom, collateralize, get a house, whatever you're doing. That is freedom and liberty. Okay. And when we have Michael Saylor out here, did you guys see what he did? He sold 32 Bitcoin, attacks the psychology of the market, price drops $10,000 per Bitcoin, and then he buys 1,500. So we have institutional players. So if you're like a Bitcoin maxi and you're just DCAing $50 in every month, you are paying Michael Saylor's dividend. That's not what Satoshi's do. That's not 21 million. That is a liquidity. That's a leak in our 21 million network, right? So if you don't want to be trapped paying Saylor's dividend, what you can do when that Bitcoin layer, when the powers that be allow Bitcoin to rise, you can take some of that profit into the Litecoin layer and vice versa. And then when they manipulate the Bitcoin down, and if you've got dry powder in the Litecoin layer, boom, you can acquire some more Bitcoin. That is how we become free. That is how Bitcoin maintains its power. All these folks that are starting to regret, oh my gosh, we let Michael Saylor get too much of the Bitcoin. Bitcoin is free still if you understand that Litecoin helps liberate it. Litecoin is like that baddie girlfriend, right? Like you got some bad dudes that thought they were going to be all da-da-da woody woo, and they came around your crib saying da-da-da, and then you got this baddie around the back that's like, get off our property, bro. We're liberty and freedom out here. And so, yeah, guys, maximalism is not the way. Together we are free. Shout out Jew Apparel. I see you. Shout out to the Soul Asylum. I want to give a big shout out to the Soul Asylum. So again, I don't hold any Solana, infinite supply, accounts based, but the people are the power. And people with sufficient education, acting in unity, can move this world and change this paradigm and can bring hope back to the people of the world. And for folks that do not know, HOPE is an acronym. H, how, O, oppressed, P, people, E, escape. HOPE is how oppressed people escape. You know how you can do that? You can trust your gut. That's GUUT. What is that? That's the grand unified UTXO theory. Okay. You notice Bitcoin UTXO, Litecoin UTXO, Zcash UTXO, Monero UTXO, Pepe or PEP UTXO, Dogecoin, etc. And so by realizing that you can mathematically flow, maintaining custody and freedom between them, that is power. That is unstoppable freedom. So if you are trying to escape the matrix, right? MEA, matrix escape artists, man. Yeah, that's how we do that. That is how the people become free. And so folks that are building on Solana, right? Like I've talked about it before, and we're going to touch a little bit on the Scrypt mining network. Let's actually talk about that maybe a little bit. I mean, I just love Litecoin so much, like for its ability to be a liberty engine, a capital, decentralized freedom, liquidity, and freedom capital of the people. And think about this too. If you're, because I guarantee you, there's Bitcoin maximalists, toxic people that don't even hold Bitcoin that would like threaten my life, my family, my all kinds of terrible things because they're evil, which is why we really gotta do away with that. But man. Oh yeah, the point is that liberty and freedom, guys. Liberty and freedom. I kind of got myself off the track because it's just sad. It's sad the way in which hubris and ego limits the ability to create freedom together. So something like a Solana, right? It's networks of people. Oh, I was gonna the $30 billion of DOGE, right? I was sidelined for DOGE because I was expecting the market to act like I would act, and it didn't. Right. And so that's the same kind of thing. So we empower Bitcoin more and all of these assets more when folks that are building in spaces like, say, the Soul Asylum, let's say the Soul Asylum is successful at helping Solana create more like sustainable models where they can break out of the pump and dump and all this kind of stuff. And what if they as a community realize, oh, shoot, there is power in things like Bitcoin and things like Litecoin. Better to have a community that's acting in unity, empowered with that knowledge, because then Bitcoin and Litecoin makes the Soul Asylum stronger, right? And then they're just another ally in our network, right? So if you really are about freedom and liberty for the people, why are you out here casting stones and making enemies when you could make allies? And especially if you call yourself a Christian, that's another, honestly, a funny thing about the Bitcoin circles. Because people, man, they're saying, why aren't people adopting Bitcoin? Well, you have some of the leading voices that think toxicity, being an evil person, is okay. It is not okay. And then you have another, which has its own different kind of limits where it's very churchy kind of energy. But what's the ironies there is these churchy folks co-signing toxicity and creating like a golden calf as well out of their Bitcoin. So, so we need more open conversations. There can't be golden calves or sacred things that you can't, we need people to be able to have free exchange. Free markets and free minds are the way that Bitcoin wins, and that we actually secure liberty for the people, because Bitcoin alone is not going to do it. If it's already not very apparent that if Bitcoin was given special privilege in the law, then we would be trapped with Saylor printing, selling Bitcoin to pay his dividends. We'd be saddled with competing with BlackRock for and advantaged borrowing practices, all these things that suddenly pulls the liberty and the freedom out of the Bitcoin set, whereas when you have the interoperability, you have freedom. As they attack us on the Bitcoin set, we seek freedom with Litecoin liberty, or, we seek our Litecoin liberty. If we're looking for additional privacy, we have MWeb that lives on the Litecoin layer, but we can go from the Litecoin set to the Zcash set. Now we have some zero knowledge cryptography, and we have the participation of wherever that is. And if and when Zcash becomes a platinum collateral project for billionaires, and so if you're going to have the billionaire class that are seeking to make sure that Zcash maintains or increases these very thoughtful levels as it grows, right? Then that empowers communities like Soul Asylum, like the fuzzy folks on XRP, you know? And again, like these NFT, like, man, there are pieces of it that are always silly. Like, I was never the one. I find it silly. But again, there are people out there that are creating liquidity pools, liquidity behind these projects. But more importantly, it's the community. It's having that 100, that 1,000, that 10,000 friends acting in unity. Because great, so you get them all together because they celebrated some art project, okay? But now you've got the ear of 10,000 friends that says, hey, do you guys want to start like a GameStop moment, a Dogecoin moment? Do you guys want to see if we can make these suits sweat? Do you want to see if this technology is at a point where we can start something that they can't stop? Do you want to see if we can take this $1,000 and turn that into freedom for all of us that are here today? Let's get it. And so suddenly you got 10,000 folks with a monkey PFP going, I'm your Huckleberry, and they're pulling Operation Litecoin Liberty. Everyone in all these NFTs going, boom, for Litecoin off these exchanges. And you have that hit 10,000, and then some, boom, Litecoin, 2, 3, 4, 500, $1,000, 3,000, 10,000, and we're going, oh man, right? And then that network of folks that may be in here, there, and the other, they now have an asset. There, that Litecoin Liberty engine, bro, is cooking, and they can make that whatever they want. If they're from the XRP fam, they go, thank you for your service, Litecoin. Now I'm going to scrub off a little bit of this profit, and I'm going to go back and maybe nourish a project that I'm building on XRP. Or, hey, look, I'm going to take some of this plenty back to the Soul Asylum. We got folks, navigating all kinds of interesting situations. It's funny. The whole Soul Asylum lore is actually really, really kind of smart, because Soul, right? There's things that are wonky on that blockchain. So it's kind of, I think it's a pretty smart narrative to say, hey, let's say, like, what would, if you're dealing in an insane system, then doesn't it kind of track that the people that an insane system identifies as insane might be the sane ones? You know what I mean? So it's kind of interesting. So shout out to them. But that's the thing, man. When we understand that acting in unity, we can create our bull market, guys. That's what kills me. Is there is enough liquidity in these NFT projects, these meme coins, and with the a $3 billion Litecoin that just acting in unity, doing an Operation Litecoin Liberty, pulling 4 Litecoin off an exchange into self-custody, that would start that people going, hey, why is Litecoin running? You know what I mean? And then we never have to let go. We just keep on going. And then but here's the thing, right? Unlike Bitcoin, right? You and me, our average friends, right? They don't have $60,000 that they can go pull a whole Bitcoin off, but they sure have $200 to buy that 4 Litecoin. So then that Liberty network of friends that we're changing their lives, we're walking into liberty and economic freedom together, more people can afford to, you know what I mean? So that we could have a network of 100,000 people whose lives are being changed together. And then that creates a cultural conversation. Then every day we're waking up, we're looking at that Litecoin chart. But then what have we suddenly created? A liberty engine of the people, Liberty Capital. So whether you're trying to start a small business, whether you're trying to get a down payment on a house, whether you're trying to launch a legitimate NFT project, what if you're creating art for the first time, right? Suddenly Litecoin becomes that freedom capital, that liberty layer, right? And what Litecoin has that your project doesn't have is that global decentralization and distribution of the validation and consensus. It's in all the centralized exchanges, and it's got a hard cap supply, and it's got the security of unspent transaction output model. That ability to unify these communities and nurture them all and actually create freedom for the people, man, it's hope. It's hope, in a time when people need it. I mean, and in the same world we're in, we've got all these folks that are losing their jobs from AI displacement. Like I don't remember how many people got laid off at Cisco and Amazon and Microsoft and whatnot. And then at the same time, we get these young folks, young folks that college isn't making sense anymore. In somewhere like America, $50,000 is a pretty like that's a decent average for like the student loan debt. But does college make sense anymore in the modern age with AI, with how accessible education is? You know, Amen, Jew Apparel, hope. Yeah, man. But yeah, and so one of the cool things I think that Litecoin and Bitcoin and these assets, they offer us of the world to create an alternative model to the college model. Crypto hope houses and hope hubs. That's how oppressed people escape. Imagine this. Imagine 4 to 6 19 to 20-year olds, right? The college age folks saying, hey, $50,000 in debt that we also can't declare bankruptcy on, mind you. We're living in close quarters in a dorm, working for professors for 4 years, right? And at the end of the 4 years, we have a piece of paper and a questionable job market and $50,000 in debt. What if the same 4 to 6 young friends, what if they took out small business loans? Now, you can write off, first of all, you could write off, right? So, okay, 4 to 6 young folks, $50,000 small business loans, could they own a house in 4 to 6 years? And then think about that. 4 to 6 years later, you've got these young folks that are 23, 24 years old that own a quarter or a sixth of a house, go to upstate Maine, Texas, Florida, Wyoming, Oregon, Washington, doesn't matter, but you create this new model. And the model, the way that I would be this, right? You spend them, you have them split their time. Because another thing that's really, really attacking the psychology and the heart and the hope of young people is the rent is too damn high. People are out here asking, why aren't people having families? Because no one can afford families. The number one cause of bankruptcy in the United States also, by the way, is medical debt. So, bro, people can't afford to put a roof over their head, much less education, travel, insurance. It's all going up, 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 up. Education. People don't have hope. And so that's why they're crashing out. So could you imagine, right? A crypto hope house gives young people a way to say, I can create capital, I can create wealth for myself. I don't have to dig myself in a hole because many hands make for light work. So how can we take what the college model is and create something more sustainable that actually creates advantage and opportunity for these young folks? So I would say, imagine 4 to 6 young friends suddenly, if you're alone, you have to work 40 to 60 hours to put a roof over your head. If you've got 4 or 6 friends, you only have to work 20 hours each. So suddenly you're not burning out. Suddenly, 4 to 6 young friends getting on the property ladder, either renting or if they want to be entrepreneurial, because think about this. What if one of them takes out a small business loan? Well, then, right, you got a home office, right? Right? You can write that off. Expenses? Do you use your car to conduct business? So do you suddenly see how using the laws as written by the rich folks, if we actually teach these young people how do we use these laws and financial tools that we have to not go into debt, to not owe educational institutions dude, I have an engineering degree, and it has been a joke for a long time that you don't actually learn at the university. You get confused at the university in a bunch of questions that you then go home and get onto YouTube, and a dope Indian friend out there breaks down that math problem or that physics concept or that thermodynamics or that statics problem that you know what I mean? So we end up having to educate ourselves anyway using these tools, right? So suddenly, if you had 4 to 6 young folks, imagine they move up to a house in upstate Maine. They say, hey, look, a lot of these communities are aging out in upstate Maine. You got this, we found a perfect little town. They got a local butcher shop. They got a local coffee shop. They got a local bakery. They got a little pizza spot. They got a little auto mechanic spot. So little mom and pop businesses. And because it's in the middle of Maine, the houses aren't like California. So we found a 4-bedroom house that we can get into that they're selling for $168,000. Now I say it needs a little bit of work, but right, Billy's dad's carpenter, he's going to be with us, right? So Billy can be, fixing up the house, which now we're establishing equity in the property, these kinds of options. So now you've got 4 to 6 young people that move to a small town. Maybe one of them has a small business loan, and now they're writing off a room in the house even as a home office. Maybe 2 or 3 of them are on that, man. And I'm not going to tell you about the Litecoin ladies that lit the lane, the Bitcoin baddies that bought the block. When you tell me there's one young woman, right? I think her name's Sophie Rains. They say she made more than $100 million using an internet connection. I'm not going to be the one that's going to tell you that a bunch of young entrepreneurial young women couldn't start creating liberty and freedom for the people. Could you imagine if Sophie Rain started taking 10% of her profit and going, yeah, I'm gonna lock that into Litecoin Liberty. You know what I mean? And man, and suddenly we have these friends, college age, that are owning houses in these neighborhoods in places like Maine and Texas, and right. So suddenly, anyway, so you got 4 to 6 young friends, okay? 20 hours a week, they work at the local small businesses. And while they're there, they're teaching, they're having conversations with the business owners of the merits of accepting at point of sale Bitcoin, Litecoin, Zcash, Monero, all these things, man, right? And then the other half of the time, the other 20, they're creating content. They're telling the story of them and their entrepreneurial young friends, like, yo, this is the Bangor 6, right? There's Bangor, Maine, or the Portland 6 or the Miami 6 or 7, whatever. Like these groups of young folks saying, yo, you're like, hey, let's look at how much of this house we own together, and then pretty soon, just creating that content in social media on TikTok and Twitch and Kick and X and YouTube, suddenly monetizing the story of being entrepreneurial young folks is its own revenue source. And then pretty soon, they don't even need the job at that local pizza shop anymore, but they keep it because it makes good TikTok content. And when you're not doing it for 40 or 60 hours a week and barely squeaking out your rent, because many hands make for light work, and you got 4 to 6 of your friends at college, you would have been in a dorm anyway, right? Now you actually have more freedom and liberty, and you're getting on the property ladder, and you're creating businesses with your friends. Because on the other 20%, right? So 20 hours you're working at the small businesses, teaching them how to use crypto and whatnot. And then the other 20, you're creating content and building in blockchain and AI. So, and getting on the that is a better model. That's at least an alternative model in the current age for young people all across the world, not just America, all across the world. It's a problem in America because, like in Germany, in Sweden, in most of these other countries, like healthcare, you can actually get your education. Did you know if you're a US citizen and you have a bachelor's degree, you can apply for like master's programs in Germany and they'll pay for it. It's much cheaper. You know what I mean? So this is very much an American kind of problem with the education system. But cryptocurrency, shout out to More Productions, is Night there? Are you talking about NIGHT, the Midnight Network? Hell yeah, bro. We're talking about the grand. So this is very much like a Litecoin centric, but the reality is the grand unified UTXO theory. That's some real business. And I will say, Night is EUTXO based, accounts based, zero knowledge cryptography. So you already know that the Midnight Network is definitely a piece of that puzzle, bro. But yeah, man. So it's things like that, man. So when you've got 4 to 6 young friends working part time, so now they're not burning out. They're also mingling. They're having fun. Has anyone ever, bro? As a matter of fact, yes. I actually had a director friend. I did a show with him. I did a show with him, and he was having an honorary kind of celebration or whatnot, bro. And I came, and I even had let me see, bring the hair down, bro. I think I was rocking it. See, I think this it leans a little bit more Jesus when the hair is down, because it goes Jesus or hey, shout out to man. Okay, Zachy C. It's good to see you, bro. Yeah, man. I didn't know that was you. Good to see you, bro. I've heard of you. And it's good to see you. I hear you're an awesome cat. Shout out to Zachy C, man. And if you don't know, shout out to the Snack fam. Shout out to Dong. Keep it long. Keep it strong. Keep it dong. Right? It's silly. It's not my bag. I don't own any dong. I don't think I own any dong, but I should own some dong. I should. because you got real people out there building. Just like I don't own any Solana, but you got the Soul Asylum, real people building real community. And that's the key. Because if you got a bunch of dong brothers, see, there's another example. You get someone like Zachy C in here, right? I know that guy's out here building all the damn time, and he's vibing with builders. More than that, he's vibing with builders and stuff. What happens? Hey, you're a real one too, bro. We're out here creating freedom, man. That's what we do, you know. Right? We carry that torch of Satoshi Nakamoto, bro. You know, freedom and liberty to the people of the world. But yeah, man. So when you start seeing things like this, you get folks like that popping in. He's got a community. And what if he goes, oh, I see what you're cooking there. And I happen to have $172 to buy 4 Litecoin. And you get someone like Don going out, hey, yo, should we join Operation Litecoin Liberty? Just pull 4 Litecoin off these exchanges, and then you get the Soul Asylum going, hey, yeah, bet. Yo, you want to go ahead and grab 4 of these Litecoin and see? Because what, right? We can always use Silent Swap, Thor Swap, Leo Dex to, if Litecoin blows up and it goes 10x, hey, move that into your Dong, move that into your PEP, move that into your Dogecoin, move that into your Bitcoin, move that into your XRP, whatever freedom and liberty game you're playing, right? But we all have that, man, and that's the way, bro. That's the way to freedom and liberty. But yeah, man. I have been told that I look like Rasputin before. You know, that's what. See, I'm actually fat right now, guys. Like I got too much. And my diet's been terrible and too much salt. But man, when I lean up, I've been running through the woods lately. So I got at least one more renaissance in me. Gotta teach this, man. God, this poor clavicular guy losing his soul to the interwebs, bro. Man, I'm gonna show him what fruits and vegetables Natty Maxon can do. Man, let's bring sexy back at least one more time. But right now we're cooking freedom and liberty for the people. Yeah, man, it's fun and it's important, man. And these Bitcoin maxis, like, it's so funny because they're finally realizing that they've poisoned their own well, dude. Have you noticed that? It's funny, dude. Bro. I was in a space the other day with a guy that's he does Bitcoin mining and all this, and he was like talking about, I want to start having meetups in person. And he's like, but why? Like, why aren't we growing? And then he proceeded to say, like, one after the other, he's like, well, we believe in freedom of speech, but we're not having any of this shit coiners. And it's like, bruh. And I immediately left the room. It's like, that's why, dude. The reason why you aren't growing community is you think toxicity is an acceptable modus operandi. And when you have a friend, maybe an ally that could turn into an ally, you make them into an enemy at sight. Right? You have someone with their little XRP backpack coming to the cookout like, gee, fellows, I got a bag. It's like, bro, what if that's someone that's got fat XRP bags that's about to be your friend? Thank you, Jew Apparel. Thank you. Yeah, man. I mean, I gotta keep running, and I need a haircut for sure. And man, I'm gonna tell you. So I used to pull my hair back. My hairline went up higher on one side because I'd always twist it when I would put it back in the bun. I'm gonna put it back up real quick, man. But yeah. Sorry, man. I'm distracting my damn self. Back. But yeah, Monero and XRP, Zcash, Community, Dong, and Zachy, wherever the hell I was. Anyway, focusing it back to Litecoin, guys. Operation Litecoin Liberty, an hour 32 deep, and so I typically limit it at about 3 hours. Today the choice was to make it very much a Litecoin heavy space, but honestly, guys, this isn't even intended to be strictly a Bitcoin and cryptocurrency channel. It's culture, it's vibes, it could be music, it could be time travel, it could be aliens, it could be anything, guys. Like, literally, man, the other day I was thinking about, hey, what if there was an ancient dagger that was made in Egypt, and there was a bell that was made in 1830, and a group of friends figures out that things actually do have memory, and that arrangement of the atoms as they were made in that time lock a memory and allow people to travel through time. So the friends ring the bell and they go to 1803, and then they find the Egyptian dagger, which is from 4302 BC, and then so we could do that sometimes, you know what I mean? So this isn't everything. This is freedom and liberty. It's just that it will more often than not, be blockchain and cryptocurrency and Bitcoin centric. Why? Freedom and liberty. We all have a finite hours of life to live, okay? And I have a unique set of skills and talents, and And when I think about how I could use my hours and my time helping educate people about what is Bitcoin, what is Litecoin, what are these cryptocurrency assets, what is a UTXO versus an account model, okay? Is it allows folks, right? Whether I ever have children, whether I ever have a wife, knowing that there's people out there that can have those families, that can buy those houses. Because when I look back at my life, bro, as an artist, I got to live in my bliss, right? On the one hand, I didn't think I was going to live to be 30, but what that did is it made me be. I had freedom. I had freedom because I was walking into death anyway. There was no reason to not live to the fullest extent. That's why back when I was performing, I had a special ring because there was something in there. There was someone that was giving everything because that's all that I expected to ever have, you know? Um, and when I think about those moments that I was able to live in my art, those would not have been possible without sound money, without free markets and free societies and people. That free people can meet up, vibe, and create beautiful things in museums and galleries and theaters and open spaces, and so when I spend my time helping educate and cultivate that the knowledge of that power, because there's only so many of us out here, like, and again, especially if you look at the Bitcoin community, bro, woo-wee. That's why I started that better Bitcoin conversations, a dedicated space, because bro, most people that have money in Bitcoin, they're either toxic maximalists or they're coming really heavy with like a church energy. And toxicity is obviously bad, and the church, nothing wrong with it, but you're not necessarily going to be open to all the conversations that that are necessary to maximize the freedom and liberty of what these things can be. um and so I choose to spend my time in a finite life serving these instruments of liberty, bro, because that makes me more free. But more than that, it makes the things that I've loved in my life, other free people. There's, bro, like I often bring up like that the woman in the symphony playing the cello. Bro, that's so sexy to me. And again, things like that don't exist if people aren't free. And one of the bases of the pyramid is money. If the state can turn you criticize the president of the UK or and Singapore or something, and they say you don't have your money anymore. You're done. That Fuck that business, bro. That's not okay. You know what I mean? And so by sharing this, the power of this knowledge of what is Bitcoin, why is it unstoppable? Why is Bitcoin and Litecoin together more unstoppable? Why is Bitcoin plus Litecoin plus Zcash and Monero and Dogecoin? Why is that more right? It starts to become, it's like, oh shoot, there's all kinds of power and possibility in there. Dogecoin and meme coins grow a lot faster, right? So if it is possible to turn $1,000 into $10,000 in the next year, think about, is Bitcoin going to 10x? Do y'all know a 2x puts it at it's almost its all-time high, right? I mean, shit, 60 grand, double that, 120. The all-time high of Bitcoin's what? 126, right? Whereas you look at something like a Litecoin, bro, its all-time high is 386 bucks, currently trading at 40. So for Litecoin to hit its all-time high, what's that? 6, 8, 9x, whatever the heck it is. I mean, bro, and then you look at, again, like things like these meme coins. I don't really buy Bitcoin to hold it, but I trade Bitcoin USD actively. I find the price action really interesting, especially around news events. Amen, Jew Apparel. Amen. Back when I like the US Iran situation recently, crude oil and Bitcoin were moving together in ways I didn't expect. Amen, Jew Apparel. Ugh, that's what I'm saying. And see, and that's the thing. I'm not saying Bitcoin ain't going to be powerful AF. I'm saying, of course it is, but let's get more friends like Jew Apparel in here. Y'all, I'm not going to blow up her spot, but I've seen this woman in different communities. She's a real one, bro. She's out here about that freedom. And amen. For folks that missed it, with Iran, that started tying Bitcoin and oil in international trade. And if you're missing that tea, woo-wee, man, then you're missing that tea. But yeah, so back in the day, Jew Apparel, in traditional financial context, I used to be managed portfolios. And like a lot of folks, I came to the market with day trading as kind of the sex and the sizzle, because there's something that's sexy about the idea that, oh, before I go to bed, I can make $10,000 today. I can make $100,000 today. You know what I mean? But what ends up happening is what I started noting is I was able to predict the broad movements of assets relying on fundamentals. If I expanded the time horizon, the domain of the time, and then furthermore, as that domain started, so classically, the definition of a day trader is you open and close all of your positions within a single day period. So a day trader literally will open and close, long or short, but you are in and out of the position within the one trading day. Swing trading is anywhere between, say, typically it's between, say, like 3 and 5 days, meaning you're willing to take your trade beyond one market hour, like classical traditional market hours. So that's swing trading. And then you have investing. Investing is typically a time horizon of 1 year or more. And so I noticed I came to the game with day trading, and I would say anyone that wants to learn about that, do paper trading first. You know, that just means like write what, give yourself, and there's all kinds of cool tools. It's been a long time since I've even looked at it, but there used to be things like Wall Street Survivor was one where they would give you a theoretical portfolio of like 100,000 or $1 million, and you could trade live, like the live numbers, but it wasn't a real account, but you could see how you would do. So if you're like, oh, I'm going to get Amazon or I'm going to get Tesla or whatever, you would see, hey, that's what you would have had, you know, and that's really good to learn. Make your mistakes on paper. And typically you want to, if you really are getting serious, if you have a year, you should. You should really paper trade for a year, and maybe if you have the means and whatever, be very thoughtful about how you maybe start dipping a toe into the more conservative plays. But I think a year of watching the markets, making decisions in the markets, but insulating yourself from your inexperience, because that's the goal. That's the goal with paper trading, is you want to make the mistakes so they don't really hurt you. You take the lessons and the learning, which helps you make money when you start going live with it. When you, which is that's a wild feeling, and it's awesome too. But anyway, as we start expanding that time horizon to Jude's a point there, you have things like this U.S. and Iran situation, right? Years ago, a great example that I bring up when I talk about this, the impact of psychology in the markets. Immediate and intermediate markets, the price we see is more driven by psychology rather than fundamentals. Fundamentals appear over the course of time. These are the things that are often traded around quarterly earnings reports and all these things. But like, for instance, once upon a time, there was the BP oil spill. There was a big major oil leak that popped off in the Gulf of years ago. And in that one day, during that trading session, BP's oil stock went like 25% down. Crazy liability on the balance sheet. But here's the thing, the wolves and whatnot. So there was a couple things. One, it was an irrational price to the downside. There was no, you know, they have a team of lawyers. So there's no way that you could actually put a number on what their liabilities of the leak, what it would be. But then the entourage effect. Once oil starts going down and the markets are trying to make sense of it, Apple goes down. Amazon goes down. These unrelated, or at least very only tangentially related. And so its psychology is offering discounts. That was what I started learning. So I had some success in managing portfolios. Unfortunately for others, mostly. But what it was understanding that in a year and also around like quarterly earnings reports are another great catalyst. Okay, when you're moving in size, earnings reports, when they say, okay, this is what we made, profit and loss, that builds in those catalysts that like Jude's looking for, like when she's talking about the US Iran crude oil situation for Bitcoin, being able to arbitrage some of that volatility out of the Bitcoin layer, playing international politics, and what we're seeing in uncertainty. And that's brilliant. That's the kind of thing we want to do. No, I trade Forex. Oh, okay. Do you look at the charts at all when you're deciding when to buy, or is it more a long-term conviction thing for you? Both. So again, like when I came, into this like years ago in TradFi, day trading was the sexy, thing. And so that's where I started. Then I was like, ooh, when I allow myself to swing trade, I have higher success. And then when I realized, ooh, I can move with more conviction and with size with that more investment time horizon, because then it becomes a thing. Like, let's say you're managing a $1 million portfolio, if you're playing one of these longer beats that you're like going, oh, okay, like The investor sees a like a 8 to 10% return on 100 grand, right? Versus a 50 or 60% return on $5,000 or $7,000, like if they're playing a day trade. So that risk reward paradigm, when you step back and you say, if you're day trading, hopefully you're not going all in. You're doing it wrong. You are doing it radically wrong. Do not do that. But what you start to see is you can have higher conviction when you're not looking for like a 40% or 50% return. When you're going, I know I see a 12%. And then you go, okay, I'm going to move with size. And then here's the other thing. When it's a blue chip, okay, if it's an Amazon or a Walmart, it's not going to zero. So even if I move with size, like put 100K into that, and I'm looking to lock in 12%, I know my downside, right? What's the likelihood that a major blue chip is going to go to zero? So that ended up being my long game strategy. To put it in a nutshell, is you play the longer time periods, you invest in blue chip assets. So in classical speak, that's a publicly traded company valued at over $1 billion, because that means it's had sufficient success. It's got, established. So it's not probably going to go to zero. Whereas if you're investing in an IPO or like a penny stock, so to speak, or like a meme coin, right, you're taking a lot of risk. So that started to be like the big play is moving with size and conviction based on larger fundamentals with more modest return, but because I can move with size, because I can have more confidence, I don't need the 40x. You know what I mean? You just give me 50%. You know what I mean? But I like the charts. I like seeing the psychology, because that also informs one's ability to model even over longer time frames. It also, leading into like quarterly earnings reports and whatnot, it allows you to more accurately model what is the psychology of the market going into an earnings report. And so for folks that don't know what an earnings report is, publicly traded companies have to report how much they've made, how much they've lost, capital allocation, talk to their shareholders, and you do that 4 times a year. Typically is how that works. And so like just that alone, became another thing. Whereas I realized I could look at blue chip companies and know that, okay, I've got quarterly catalysts. Every quarter, I'm going to probably get that 5 to 10% that I'm looking for, especially if I'm moving with size. But then the gold moments, I'm looking for things like you called out with a US Iran situation. I'm looking for things like BP oil spill. What I really want, I want a psychological catalyst that is going to irrationally price discounts temporarily into unrelated assets that are blue chip assets. So when you have a BP oil spill day and you see your Apple stock give you an 11% discount, move it in with size, right? Move 100 grand into that bish, and then it's going to retrace 6%, pull out 50% of the move. I'm good, and maybe ride the rest and see, So there's all kinds of stuff that when you expand the time horizon, your odds of predicting correctly, for me, they went up. And so then you end up moving with greater size. You're looking for like lower multiples, but because you're making substantially more for 50% of 100 grand, right? You're 50,000 to the good. Whereas you need a 50x on $1,000. You know what I mean? To get the same return. So I like looking at the charts, is I guess to say that, but I like to read the psychology. And it's also good to volume profiles. There's a whole lot here. We could do a whole thing about trading, and about some of those signals and kind of what are the top level ways to sort of map some of the ways in which people can map these things. I look at volume profiles are very important. For folks that don't know what volume is, that's how many people are like buying or selling that asset at the various price levels. So when you see, like, for instance, like people learn after market hours have a lot of volatility. And the reason is there are less participants in the market. So during normal market hours, you might have billions of dollars that are flowing through a stock, but then after market, it goes down to millions. Okay. And oftentimes companies will settle their books at the end of the market. So they'll do it in these aftermarket hours. So what you can end up happening is an asset that trades at billions of dollars in the open market, then it hits aftermarket and it drops from billions of dollars of volume to millions of dollars of volume. And then you'll have companies that are settling their books at the end of the day. And then final piece here, the spot price is set at the last executed buy and sell order. And so if the last executed buy and sell order is a modest, where in normal market hours it's not that big, but in aftermarket hours, instead of billions, it's millions, it can have a huge impact on the spot price. Okay. But maybe it's only 1% of that daily's trading. So you might see an asset go from, say, $100 to $112. And so everyone's looking at aftermarket hours going, oh my gosh, we just, it went up 12%. Huzzah. And for folks that like, cryptocurrency markets and returns are absolutely crazy. In TradFi, 12% is great. Like literally, the rule of sevens was if you can make about 7% for 7 years is about 100% return on your portfolio. It's actually a little bit less, but more or less that's where it'll go. But yeah, whereas like in cryptocurrency circles, you hear people talking about, oh, I want a 2x, 3x, 4, 5, 50, 100x. Remember, every X is like 100% return. Okay. So imagine if Wall Street is looking to double your portfolio's value roughly every 7 years. So if you got an asset manager, and that's also why, man, why you compounding interest with time is so powerful. That's also why they say your first 100,000 is the hardest that you will ever make. Because think about this, right? Using the rule of sevens. Let's say you're 30 years old, you know what I mean? Or 21 years old, and you got $100,000. Okay. Well, if you're in 7 years, so now you're 28, you doubled it. Okay. So now instead of 100,000, you have 200,000. And remember, that's if you weren't contributing along the way. That's just that 100,000, that's already in the account yielding over 7 years. So now you're 28 with 200,000. Well, okay. Well, then the next one, you're going to be, 30, 30, whatever, in your mid 30s. And then, but now you have 400,000. Okay. And then one more doubling, you're going from 400 to 800,000. You know what I mean? So in TradFi, it's modeled at much, much longer time periods. So it's like, it's just interesting. It's fascinating, and that also speaks to a lot of the opportunity that exists in like the cryptocurrency and blockchain space. But I think that's another way, by sharing that knowledge, by getting more consistent and sustainable expectations of what the market can bear. There's a whole like science, how do you keep like even a meme coin project healthy? That fundamentally it's the same thing that keeps in any L1 like Bitcoin healthy. It's just, different scales and where are they on the growth curve and all these things. But yeah, landing the plane on the aftermarket hours is volatility matters, right? So if you have a lot of price action where, oh, wow, it went from $100 to 112, but then you look a little deeper and you go, oh, look, the volume, it's 1.2 million. Okay, so yes, the last executed trade was substantially higher than, say, when the market closed or whatever, but there's not a lot of volume. There's not a lot of conviction, which means when that market opens again, there's not enough volume supporting that price. So it's probably going to radically correct very quick, And so that's where understanding the importance of the volume profile that underlies the price that the asset is trading at. That's why Bitcoin at 69,000, I think a lot of Bitcoin under 69 is a lot of it is artificial suppression and whatnot. But it is what it is, Again, I think Clarity Act is coming. I think Clarity Act is coming before November and all this stuff. Anyway, I've kind of gotten further afield from the Litecoin conversation than I wanted to, but we are coming up on 2 hours. So I'm going to kind of focus this up, maybe stick the landing on this plane in the next 30 minutes or so. But shout out to Jew Apparel and for contributing in the chat, because this typically would be how this works, is at this point after the first hour, it's driven by what anyone wants to talk about. So if someone could come in and be like, oh yeah, what do you think about this or think about that or whatever, and we would just vibe with that, you know what I mean? Until energies and inspirations guided it elsewhere. But I really want to do a shout out to the Litecoin, and again, because I truly do believe that of all assets, it is the best positioned to serve as that freedom capital, that come up, that wherever you're building, whether it's XRP, Ethereum, Solana, Bitcoin, whatever, that Litecoin can be that multiple with size. Because that's the other thing when we talk about moving with size, Litecoin fulfills that profile of what I would have been looking for back in the day in traditional finance contexts of a healthy blue chip that you can move in with size, you can look at those historical price levels and the volume profiles, and you can go, okay, what is the likelihood that Litecoin hits $100 in the next 18 months, let's say? You know what I mean? And again, remember, the next Litecoin halving is in 1 year and a month. It's in less than 400 days, July 2027. The Litecoin block reward, which is issuing 6.25 Litecoin every 2 to 5 minutes, is going to drop to 3.125. So that's the same decrease in the block reward that Bitcoin had in 2024. So when you start thinking about this, and halvings have less impact over time, but remember, Litecoin is one halving behind Bitcoin. So, and when you think about the timing of that the next halving is going to hit in summer of next year, which when you look at regulatory environment and whatnot, probably going to be in a post-Clarity Act situation. So I think there really is a perfect storm where, there's a great quote, the markets can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent. That is very true. And we're definitely seeing it here. And it's doubly so when we have institutional manipulation from leadership like we see now. Like we all saw that someone, whoever it was, went like 20 or 30 million dollar long oil futures. And then I think it was the president basically made an announcement about Iran related stuff, and then oil flew through the roof. And then whoever did this made like $60 million in like minutes. And it's like, what are the odds that there wasn't some inside cooking? You know what I mean? For that person to move with such conviction mere minutes before a major catalyst and a major announcement. So these are the kinds of things, bro. So when we're looking at like Bitcoin and the way that the markets are moving, we're being irrational if we think that there isn't major manipulation behind the scenes. I guarantee you there is. And if you want, just look at the profit that our politicians make. And again, it's legal apparently, so to speak, or seems to be. And again, it's all art and entertainment out here. Like, do your own research. But, again, our politicians make so much money for a reason. It's because they have exposure to assets before laws that they pass has an impact. Jew Apparel's asking, what is Litecoin's price right now? Live, it is trading at $41.96 with a market cap of $3.24 billion. 24-hour volume looks like it's $214 million, and that's actually down 20.73% in a 24-hour period. And then that's in the volume. But yeah, Litecoin's trading at $41.97, so just about 42. It's like right now it looks like Solana is holding like 69. Well, last I checked, it was trading at like 71. Actually, let's do a quick overview of the markets really quick. So Bitcoin just dipped just a little bit below 69 again, but it's trading at damn near 60. It's 59,984. So Bitcoin's holding at 60,000. Almost flat for the day, 0.23% to the positive on the 24-hour. Litecoin is up 0.55, so slightly outperforming Bitcoin at basically 42 flat. PEP coin is a hell of a deal, guys. Shout out to PEP coin, the Scrypt mining network. I'll cover that a little bit more in a second. What's Litecoin's price right now? Yeah, Litecoin's price right now is $41.97 as of June 27th, 2027, at approximately 3:27 Pacific Standard Time. And that's per coin market cap. So it's around $42. And again, there will only ever be 84 million Litecoin. For every one Bitcoin, there are 4 Litecoin, right? How wouldn't you like to be able to, how cool it would be able to be to get a Bitcoin for less than $200, right? Right now, Litecoin is offering the market a heck of a discount and an asset that, again, you can turn Litecoin into anything. And when you look at which asset is best positioned to do that 2, 3, 4, 5x, because I think that's the way to look at this, guys. Litecoin, we're not looking at that as like a 50x, 100x, like a meme coin. What's really powerful though, we want to start, and we could start, a meme coin style run. But the game here to me is that Litecoin presents that opportunity for a global community to book that 2, 3, 4, 5, 6x with size. Okay, so imagine you're that young, whatever. Maybe you've got a couple $100,000 in a portfolio. That's the kind of thing where, getting that, 20, 30, 40, $50,000 worth of participation in something like a Litecoin at these levels, especially at $42 Litecoin. When you look at the all-time chart, it's more or less over $50. So in the same way that Bitcoin under like 60K and whatnot is or under 69 is whatever, Litecoin, I think under that $50 level, when you look at where that volume has participated, is really a gift. I do not think we're going to have Litecoin under $50 for too long of a time. And that's why when I'm thinking, if I put my old TradFi hat on, if I was managing a portfolio, I would absolutely have exposure to this, because I know that I can pretty confidently, doing that risk reward trade-off, I can move with size, because I know at this level, if I committed, say, $50,000 worth of capital, what's the odds that I can turn that $50,000 worth of capital into 100, right? That means that's $84 Litecoin, right? Its all-time high is 386, so that's well under the all-time high. It was up at those levels. Litecoin was over $100. I want to say within the last 8-9 months, whatever. We've got the next halving coming in a year, in less than 400 days. We've got Clarity Act coming. So when I think about opportunities in the market, if I was moving with size with the portfolio, and it's like, okay, what could I say? Hey, I'm going to put 50,000, 100,000 on. Litecoin is one of those plays where its current valuation and its future paradigm, especially if I don't have to touch that capital for 12 to 24 months. And that's the other thing, thinking like investors, right? The investor, the time horizon minimum is a year, and so, yeah, when I look at something like Litecoin and I go, oh shit, it's got a halving in about a year, man, I feel really good about Litecoin. Moving with size, and being able to book, that 100% return within the next, call it 12 to 18 months is what I would model that as. And that would be a conservative. I would conservatively model that I am probably going to have an opportunity to purchase get the $42 Litecoin. I'll probably be able to sell that Litecoin at $84 or better within the next 12 to 18 months. You know what I mean? And again, not financial advice, and these are all just theoretical numbers and whatnot for education, because that's the game here, is we want to educate our community and say, what are these opportunities, right? If we're trying to have people that they can afford to have those babies, buy that house, start that business, buy those groceries, pay that rent. The way that we do that is this knowledge. How do we empower the Bitcoin layer, the Litecoin layer, the Monero, the Zcash, all these, different memes and whatnot, because also they're not all created equal. Most projects will fail. Most blockchains are not a good use of your time. I've said before, I've got two primary criteria that I typically look for as my filters. One, does it have a hard cap supply? Because if I'm trying to escape infinite fiat inflation in the printer, I want to know there's 21 million Bitcoin, there's 84 million Litecoin, there's 45 billion Cardano ADA, there's 21 million Zcash, these sorts of things. And then that UTXO basis means that I can flow with mathematics to the Bitcoin set. Right? So if I know Bitcoin's going to win, if my thesis is that Bitcoin's kind of the base of that capital pyramid, that Bitcoin is going to take over the place of the dollar in international trade over the course of the next 5 to 7 years, because I really believe that's what we're going to see. I think that if I was putting on the Captain America hat trying to do PR for this administration, I would say, yeah, guys, tariffs are the stick and crypto is the carrot. I'm going to give you a tariff because what I want to do is open up a line of dialogue. It's an auspice for conversation in a failing fiat system, right? So we can go we can dicker and trade and get on each other's nerves with this tariffs, because I know at the back end, I'm going to pass Clarity Act. I'm going to make crypto and blockchain go live. And I know that's the real winner. The queen on the board is going to be Bitcoin. Right? So then what I can do, now that I have a conversation started in fiat denominated terms with all these tariffs and this international trade, I say, hey, do we want to maybe have a better situation cooking? What if we do Bitcoin preferred? Right? So maybe in fiat land, we got tariffs, we got this, that, or the other. But if we're talking Bitcoin, I think that's what we're going to see. I think in a post-Clarity Act world, we're going to see that. And in that world, when we know that, y'all know what Berkshire Hathaway is? Yes, it's Warren Buffett's company, who he's now retired. He's handed over those batons. But he, like 7-8 years ago now, he famously was like, oh, Bitcoin's rat poison squared. But that was 8 years ago. And if y'all saw some of the cheeky little things he said at his last Berkshire Hathaway, they do like a weekend long event, and he was talking about the challenges that face the dollar and the domestic U.S. economy, and the need to perchance look a little closer at alternative currencies, I think is what he had said. And then he made a cheeky little joke. Someone had asked him about what were the merchandise and revenue sales for the event. And I think he had said, oh, maybe somewhere around $21 million or something. But that 21 million stuck with some people. He's like, oh, is Warren Buffett like tipping his cap that, oh, maybe it's not so much rat poison squared. Maybe in the last 7 or 8 years, he's done a little bit more research, and he also knows that he's handing over the reins. So who's to say that Warren Buffett's successor at Berkshire Hathaway isn't willing to explore the Bitcoin hypothesis? Or if they were really brilliant, Litecoin, period. Litecoin would be absolutely like the play. Because again, how much more? Like when you see the numbers, we'll hear that Michael Saylor puts $1 billion into Litecoin, like multiple times. There was like a while ago where he was peeling off some just crazy number. Whereas again, Litecoin's entire market cap is 3.26 billion. So if you saw these like major institutional players, if you really wanted to, get a piece of the pie, a Berkshire Hathaway level, entity, and that is what I think we're going to see over these next 18 months, particularly as we lead into 2029, is I think we're going to see the passage of Clarity Act. We're going to see more discussion of international trade with Bitcoin preferred over the dollar. And then we're going to start seeing major institutional bellwethers like Berkshire Hathaway. Okay, now Berkshire Hathaway famously, I think they have over 700 billion. It's some crazy number. And that's not the size of their company. They're bigger than that. Their cash exposure. Okay, but now think about this. Coming out of like the COVID era and whatnot, in a single 1 year time period, when you look at cost of goods and whatnot, the dollar has lost more than 10% of its value in like rolling 12-month time periods. And so when you look at the fact that, wow, all of that cash, billions, hundreds of billions of dollars on Berkshire Hathaway's balance sheet is going to be burning. It's going to be going away. What if you're managing that portfolio? What are your options to outrun that inflation? Bitcoin, baby, is one of them. Litecoin is one of them. Maybe Zcash is going to be a piece of that for some folks. These kinds of things. And so when institutions like that say, hey, with that billions of dollars worth, 2 or 3%, that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about, oh, they're going to put their whole treasury. No. But 2 or 3% of $700 billion is a consequential purchase. But what it ecological catalyst, the precedent that it then sets for these major, not only all these US-based, companies, but internationally. That's what's called, that's a major bellwether and a signal. And so that's where I think we would see these companies that traditionally have a lot of cash exposure. 2 of the big ones, right? Apple, Berkshire Hathaway, Google. Some of these companies have a lot of cash on their balance sheet. And I think these are the kinds of entities where when Clarity Act passes, because who's the people that are paying our politicians and whatnot that are in these back rooms? Why do you think Bitcoin is a discount right now? I will tell you why. It's to offer a buying opportunity for these suits and for these folks. This is when they're hammering out, okay, if this is where power is going to flow. And then furthermore, because these are freedom networks, they're trying to shake you out. They don't want to give you freedom. They don't want you being with, the privileged class, the 1%. They like it being an exclusive club. If you're desperate and in need and you have to, that's another thing that upsets me about these people that are saying everyone's got to have babies and all this. It's like, no, not if you can't afford it. Buddha and the baby Jesus bless those people that are saying, I'm not going to have children that I can't afford. But you know why they want you having children? Because you might go, nope, I'll starve. I'm not right, but I'll be damned if I can't feed my baby. Because if you've got a child to feed, maybe you and that little baddie, if you're in your Romeo and Juliet, Bonnie and Clyde kind of energy, you might be willing to go, no, man, me and my girl and me and my friends, man, we're not gonna bow down to you. But if you've got a baby, if you got a baby in the other room, bro, you can't choose for that child to starve, to be subject to hardship. So that's another reason why they want people having babies and stuff that they cannot afford, specifically that. I think it's, man, in America, they were talking about paying people like $2,000 and $3,000 to have a baby to incentivize it. But we all know exactly who would be having these babies. It would be people that cannot afford it, that are probably also on things like food stamps and whatnot. And I'm not blaming them that they're on that, because the economy has been wrecked bad for a long time. Back in the day, you could have one dude that with a high school diploma, right, and working at a local gas station, and he could afford to own a house, raise a wife, and have a baby or two. And he might even be able to get a vacation house at a lake somewhere. Back in the 40s and 50s and whatnot. We're coming out of World War II, so like in the 50s and whatnot. But today, you need two adults working full time to try to pay rent. So yeah, man. The powers that be do not want you to be free. They want people having to punch a clock. Now, it's really interesting in this age of AI and automation. They're laying off a lot of people. They're talking about, but bro, I'm not going to be the one that's going to, dude. A lot of the poverty and the hardship and the homelessness that we see in many of these countries, like even in America, it's a choice, guys. It's not that we'd have to do it. We could do a little bit better with how we're managing our resources, which is why if we could be doing way better than we are right now, like again, the number one cause of bankruptcy in the United States is medical debt, guys. Medical debt, medical bankruptcy. Like, God help you. Like, do you know what that does to like entrepreneurs, bro? How much scarier it is, because we get our insurance through our employers in America. So if you've got that a young couple saying, "Hey, look, we're gonna open up a bakery in Colorado. It's gonna be brownies and biscuits and cannabis, coffee and cannabis, and in Colorado with Susie and Bill." And then they're trying to start up this little cafe, but then, oh god, riding their bikes to the cafe one morning, they fall. Oh my god, he broke his leg, right? And if you know medical bills in the United States, a broken leg, a badly broken leg, easily could be over 100 grand, easily, like on surgeries, hospital. I mean, it's just, and then what's it called, physical therapy and stuff. It's bad. And so right there, in one normal human ass, it happens, bro. No one wants to break their leg, but it happens, right? Young, healthy people doing a thing. And that kind of event alone in America kills that entrepreneur's business dream, right? Because they have to provide their own insurance at that point. And so it's these kinds of things we can do better. And blockchain technology and artificial technology in free markets allows the people to have better alternatives to the current private insurance models. Because here's the reality, guys. You know what insurance is? And ask any of your large language models, your AI, whatever. Insurance is probabilistic money shuffling. Period. That's what insurance is, right? Like, you have two Walmart employees. Susie is 60 placement. Timmy is 20 and he was a track star. Okay. Susie pays more into her Walmart, Blue Cross or whatever, Aetna, who knows, her plan, right? Because on paper, it's all probabilities. A 60-year-old woman with a heart murmur and a hip replacement is probably going to need to tap her health insurance. Ergo, her policy premium every month is a number. It's going to be higher than Timmy, who is 20, because a 20-year-old Timmy track star is probably not going to need cholesterol medication and shit. So his insurance policy is lower. These things are all well within the domain of what an AI could do, where you log into your freedom insurance policy, your AI blockchain insurance policy, right? Because what we're trying to do now is cut out these middlemen. Because do you understand that and also here's the other uncomfortable truth. It's socialist. It's a socialist model, which is you get 100 people paying into a common pot and commensurate with their need, right? Susie's 60, but she's paying into the same pot, Blue Cross, Aetna, whatever, as a. That's the thing. So when you look at what the insurance model is, according to your probability of use, that's what your premium is. But these private insurance companies take 20%. out of that. So you have a pool of funds that's supposed to be all healthcare. Bunch of strangers working at Walmart, paying into the socialist pot. This is supposed to be for healthcare, right? But private insurance first says we're going to take 20% and it's gone. Now with the remaining 80, we'll try to get your bills paid. Think about this. With blockchain and AI, you don't need them. If it's all probabilistic money shuffling, we can directly pay the doctors. We can figure out those probabilities, we can administer those policies and set those premiums, pay those premiums on blockchain. We can do man, shout out to Midnight Network and privacy preserving, where we can put these records, we can encrypt them, we can distribute them, we can get doctors directly paid. We can, and we can decouple these private insurance. So either everyone's premiums are going to be immediately 20% cheaper. You know what I mean? There's just so many more wins. So free markets, baby, free markets. Same thing with banks. Banks are afraid to compete with DeFi because you can use, if I have $100,000 using DeFi, I know that I can get 8% or better on stablecoin yield alone in DeFi right now. If I go to a bank, right? But guess what? Those banks, what do? They're going to give me 3% on my $100,000 deposit, right? But with fractional reserve banking, for every dollar that I put into that bank, they can lend out 10 or more. So now my $100,000 turns into $1 million plus for their credit division, and they're making 24% on my money. They're making my 100 grand look like $1 million and then charging me 20% or my neighbor 20+% for a credit card. And then they're giving me 3%, right? Whereas with DeFi, I can make that money. I can lend that money. That is why banks are afraid. And in a free market, right, they should have to compete. Because in America right now, we are sacrificing the futures of families on the altar of creative destruction. Saying, hey, I'm sorry, Susie, but your emails were great, your spreadsheets were great, but at the end of the day, Claude costs us $5,000 a year. You cost $75,000 plus your benefits, right? So I'm sorry, but we're going to go with Claude, right? Well, hey, if we accept that and we say that's fine, and hey, bet is what it is, right? Well, then insurance companies and banks can't be out here trying to pay our politicians like they are doing, like pushing back against a stablecoin yield in the Clarity Act, because they don't want to compete with DeFi. Meanwhile, if we actually think about this, there's a golden thread where everyone wins, okay? So if one of our concerns is inflation, and when I deposit dollars into banks, they print more. They go 10 to 1 or more. That is inflation. So if there are less deposits in banks, because some of them are in DeFi, what does that mean? That means there's less inflationary pressure due to deposits in banks. What does that do? It gives the Federal Reserve an auspice for a rate cut, MFers. So do you see, when we actually empower folks that aren't greedy, whatever, and we can win. Everyone can win. Free markets and free minds is the way, bro. So we can actually give banks a more favorable environment by making lending and borrowing cheaper by removing some of the deposits in the banks because they're existing in DeFi because people are free. But then here's the reality. Even if we knocked it out of the park, we're not getting 5% of those deposits. You know what I mean? Not like out of the bag. I mean, over the course of time, I would hope so. But that's the thing, man. It's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's anti-competitive, and it's one of the reasons why America is suffering right now. It's one of the reasons why it's absurd that this administration is talking about artificially keeping housing prices and stuff up, man. It is not good. Introducing artificial price controls in markets, as is typically known, is typically not good. Now, people are given, I guess, in New York, they did some kind of a rent freeze and whatnot. But that's an interesting kind of a case of a price control, because in a similar way, if we are artificially increasing the market value of it, then, right? I mean, so it's kind of weird. Like, so there's a dynamic conversation. If you've got bullshit making prices high, then maybe a little bullshit saying, hey, stop doing your bullshit is kind of, a little bit warranted. But again, I think free markets and free minds is the max. That's how we should do this, man. So yeah. This definitely spun into a broader thing than just a Litecoin. But yeah. So I'm gonna land the plane on that. In summary, or touching on some of the main pieces, 84 million Litecoin, UTXO based, each one divisible by 100 million units. Very, very cool. When one Litoshi, the smallest individual unit of a Litecoin, is worth 1 penny, one Litecoin will be worth $1 million. Kind of a similar thing with the Satoshi on the Bitcoin set. LiteStrategy. LiteStrategy versus strategy and what Saylor's doing. So LiteStrategy is a publicly traded company. The ticker is LITS. The other one is Luxfolio, based out of Canada. LUXX, I believe, is the ticker. And they were actually the first publicly traded Litecoin company. It's just they were in Canada relative to America, and LiteStrategy is an American-based company, so they kind of got a little bit more shine. But LiteStrategy used to be My Pharma. So they are a revenue positive company. And so here's the thing. A lot of Bitcoin treasury companies are getting flack for being Bitcoin treasury companies. There is nothing wrong with being a Bitcoin treasury company. In fact, it is a superior model to traditional treasury approaches. But here's the thing. Not if they do with what Saylor's doing. Saylor is starting to do a lot of, exotic derivatives and raising of debt and issuing at the market and dilution and a lot of fiat shenanigans. Okay. A healthy Litecoin or Bitcoin treasury company looks like this. I sell auto parts. I make $50 million in profit, in revenue, after whatever. And so what I'm going to do as a Bitcoin treasury or a Litecoin treasury company, that $50 million in revenue, not debt, that is now after my expenses and whatnot, I'm going to take that profit, and I'm going to say, hey, 20% of that. I'm going to take 20% of that, and I'm going to turn it into Bitcoin. And I'm going to take 5%, and I'm going to turn it into Litecoin, and I'm going to hold it. And the rest I'll keep in fiat, right? That is an example of a very healthy treasury strategy, right? Because they don't own that Bitcoin with debt. There's not some ticker or some encumbrance or some maybe or some liquidation level. No, they are a revenue positive business that rather than holding their capital in a depreciating asset like fiat that inflates and all this, and there's the printer and we're just climbing a hockey stick, they go, hey, I'm going to take some of this plenty, and I'm going to lock it into a 21 million unit set and a little bit over here in an 84 million unit set. That, rinse and repeat, that's good. That's strong. And that's more like what strategy was when it was MSTR alone, because the thing there was strategy, MicroStrategy was an enterprise software solution situation. So there was no real big forward growth. It was basically, like let's say, hey, we get $100 million a year from like a network of like, say, credit unions, for instance, right? So you get, and that's not sexy, right? We run the software in these credit unions, so when people go and they put in a little ATM card, we run that, let's say, okay? And that gives us 50 million, 100 million a year. What Saylor did is he said, hey, I see what this Bitcoin is. It's got a hard cap supply. If I start bidding the market, right, the spot price is the last executed buy and sell order. So if I start removing this Bitcoin from the market using this kind of, legacy business that isn't very sexy, doesn't have a lot of forward growth, publicly traded and failing all over the place, I can start acquiring this asset. So he did. And because he started doing that, the spot price starts going up on Bitcoin. And now the Bitcoin is on his balance sheet. And so for Unifree, so now suddenly he turns a legacy business with not a very sexy forward growth paradigm, but he's stacking Bitcoin when it's 12 and 15,000 back in the day, and that became this, the quality of Bitcoin that he used to make MSTR, MicroStrategy, the most performant asset on Wall Street for 2 years in a row until NVIDIA came, riding AI. It was the 21 million cap supply. That was it. Just saying, hey, look, if I'm bidding it up, and then everyone that has some is going to go, okay, fine, I'll sell it to you for this. I'll sell it to you for that, right? And that price of what people are willing to part with, it'll go up and up and up, supply and demand, all this business. And Saylor successfully got something really, really smart. And a lot of us were out there saying, hey, look, MSTR in a Roth IRA is the play, and it was, because before Bitcoin spot ETFs were approved, the way to get exposure to Bitcoin through a Wall Street instrument was MSTR. But at the time, he wasn't issuing a bunch of MSTR at the market, diluting it. And he wasn't introducing Strike, an 8% per annum dividend based on Bitcoin. And then Stretch, now it's 11.25 or whatever percent paid out biweekly. And all of these derivatives, and then he's starting to, MSTR at the market to acquire Bitcoin to back this up and then to pay these dividends. It's bad. So that's when it really started to blow up. And it ceased to be at all what it was, and then it's become this large, fiat industrial / debt complex. Whereas LiteStrategy, ticker is LITS, is a revenue positive company that is choosing to put Litecoin on its balance sheet and then using that Litecoin productively, using call options and whatnot to generate yield and whatnot. There was a post earlier today from, I think is Jay Files, I don't know if he's the CEO or the president of LiteStrategy, but he was out there discussing that distinction between LiteStrategy's approach to the market and MicroStrategy's. So that is a major difference. Anyway, so touching on the Scrypt mining network and PEP, right? So a couple things there, right? So you can concurrently merge mine Litecoin and Dogecoin and Bell's Coin and these other coins and Pepcoin or Pepcoin. PEP is the ticker. Currently trading at, again, like $8 million, 8.34 at 0.0000408110. 24-hour trading volume, $76,500. So again, very much early days. Total supply. Now, similar to Dogecoin, there is no supply limit, but reading the PEP white paper, there is a halving until it goes down to like a minimum issuance rate. And I forget what it is. It's like 10,000 PEP a day or whatever it is. But it does eventually go bang down to so there's a tailing, it is infinite supply, similar to Dogecoin. But again, more sound than the US dollar. But again, right now, I think there's a couple really, really interesting opportunities for Pepcoin. So one, I like the fact that it is concurrently merge mined with a project like Litecoin. Powerful, and Dogecoin. Powerful. But what Pepcoin has is its proof of work, okay? Whereas Ethereum, the most popular Pepe coin, PEPE, is an asset that lives on the Ethereum layer. And Ethereum famously went from proof of work to proof of stake and all this, and then you got these L2 scaling issues and all this stuff. But culturally, frogs, there have been so many like Pepe derivatives and whatnot. So like frog assets and frog coins, built and launched on these like pump fund style platforms all over the place. But now think about this. This Pep coin is a dedicated, their Twitter handle is Pepe Coin Network, because unlike being an asset that lives on another blockchain, maybe some proof of stake or whatever, it is its own asset. So I think that when we look at Quest coins, culture coins, whatnot, Pepcoin is so well positioned to be like the rallying point of the frogs, to be a place to migrate. So like for the pitch to the Pepe coin community, right? You want to get that frog unity, but you could talk about that return to a proof of work. You could talk about a dedicated blockchain to build on. You've got the fact that LitVM offering these smart contract expressiveness, PEP, right, would be maybe very well positioned to be a collateralizable asset to access and use in, say, Litecoin DeFi. And then again, we've also got Cardano over there cooking all kinds of DeFi. We got Bifrost and whatnot unlocking Bitcoin DeFi. But Bitcoin's UTXO set means it's going to grandfather in Litecoin and Dogecoin and Pepcoin and Monero and Zcash, all this really cool shit. So this Pepcoin, when you look at a market cap like 8.32 million, and a spot price like 0.000, 4 zeros and 8084, it's just so well positioned. Because like, what is Pepcoin? So relative to 8.32 million, let's see what Pepcoin. So we know the best marketing is green candles, right? So Pepcoin, so 985.0 million, so damn near at $1 billion. So wow. So yeah, Pepcoin is still holding almost $1 billion. Its volume in the last 24 hours was 107 million. They maximum supply 413.77 trillion. So they must have burned, because I think they minted something like 420, right, for the culture. But yeah. So if you think about that, you've got a cultural sort of phenomenon and a holder base that has $1 billion worth of capital, and then boom, you got a ticker in PEP that is a dedicated network now, and it's got a market cap of just radically smaller, way smaller. So a unity and coordination from like the PEP, from Pepe into PEP, whoo, they could run it up. And think about that, right? So if you want to get new liquidity and whatnot, it's riding that wave of growth. So I just think that if we're talking about that meme coin layer, social fi layer, and whatnot, and again, I don't hold any, but I like the fact that it's part, it's merge mind. And the success of these networks, as if PEP grew in adoption, it literally increases the security essentially of Litecoin, because then you've got more people that are incentivized to be running the kind of hardware that validates concurrently Litecoin and Pepe and Dogecoin, and Bell's coin is another big one. Because there was like three major ones. It was like I think it was just Doge, Bell's, and PEP are the three that I've heard of that have sort of distinguished themselves. Bell's is kind of interesting because it came out around like the Dogecoin era. It just never really, was pushed. It was more like, oh, let's try to do this thing, and but then people have been saying, hey, let's see what we can do with it. But of them, I think PEP, of the merge mind ones, other than Doge, I think PEP is the no-brainer. It's the best positioned. It's got the PEP, the frog coin, the unity of the frogs. It's in the basement right now, so it's got all of its growth ahead of it. So if it can really coordinate and collaborate with immunity, again, it's kind of like Operation Litecoin Liberty. I think things like that, for Litecoin. So yeah, shout out to LiteStrategy and whatnot, tickers LITS. Shout out to also Luxfolio, two publicly traded companies with Litecoin on their balance sheet. But yeah, so landing the plane here on this, because we are 2.5 hours in, and the Xander Zayas fight is coming. And yeah, that's gonna be dope. But yeah, so for Litecoin, they could benefit from like an Operation Litecoin Liberty, get 4 Litecoin, move them from a centralized exchange into self-custody. Pepcoin, similar kind of things. The other thing that Litecoin and Pepcoin, you want to have a roadmap, a series of goals and objectives that the community can have their eyes on and celebrate moving towards. Because then once you have objectives to achieve together, you can give each other feedback and you can refine in an effort to achieve, right? So like Litecoin, again, from 42, take back the diamond floor of Litecoin at 50. Okay, $50 Litecoin. Once you're at 50, what's the next target? 69. Once you're at 69, what's the next target? 100. Once you're at 100, what's the next target? 420 / the all-time high, which is actually like 386. But 420, just like 69, it's mimetic. It's fun. You can rally people around it. And you have those auspices for conversation and community building and whatnot. And then once you're at 420, $1,000 becomes right into play. So it's these kinds of things shared amongst a community that start to create unity and power. We start actually having an impact. We start running the price of these assets up together. So I think Litecoin, most powerful play in the market for actually liberating the people of the world and creating a decentralized freedom, liquidity, freedom capital layer that all people that are building in these decentralized freedom technologies can use to foster whatever they're building in the free market, man. Because I'm a big fan. Again, I think that in this age, this really might be the last peaceful free market solution that remains to the people of America and the world. America, shout out to the founding fathers. We have Second Amendment solutions for a reason. Yeah, and we had Third Amendment, right? The Quartering Act, but that's being infringed on by Palantir. For folks that don't know, like the Quartering Act, the Third Amendment means you will not be asked to house soldiers in your home without your consent. Because back in the day, the King of England, once the colonists were getting whatever, he said, you know what? I'm going to have you put my soldiers in your house. You're going to quarter my soldiers, meaning my soldiers need a place to sleep. They're sleeping under your roof with your wife, your kids, and your business, your person's papers and effects as well, which is our Fourth Amendment, privacy. So when you look at this and you realize, wow, Palantir, it's in your Alexa, it's in your phone, it's in your laptop, it's in all of your internet connected devices. Palantir is in it. That is a U.S. government military contractor in your devices, in your home without your consent. I see an infringement on your Third and Fourth Amendment, right? And so, and we know the powers that be are not serving us. Our money's messed up, housing's too crazy, eggs, toilet paper, bro. You know what I mean? These people are not on our side, and so we got Second Amendment, or peaceful free market. I like peaceful free market. Shout out to, as Jesus said, love thy neighbor. right? And you will know them by their fruit. And as the man Martin Luther is said to have said, faith without works is dead. So if you're about all that kind of stuff, leaning into maybe your Jesus energy, your Buddha energy, love your neighbor, man. Let's build something together. And I think that, yeah, we have there is a golden thread to follow, whereby empowering free markets, free minds, actually getting capitalism. That's another thing, man. If you're a fan of capitalism, we do not have we have crony we have all kinds of messed up, distorted. We got cutthroat, crony ass, never had to earn it capitalism. It's not cool. Whereas again, if these banks had to compete, if these insurance companies had to compete with blockchain and AI like the people, well, we'd have a hell of a lot more optionality and entrepreneurship kicking off in America, which is exactly what we need. And Larry Fink knows it too, as he was saying as he was coming home from Davos. So don't get shook, don't get took. They cook you with your pocketbook. Chicken little reasons rhyme and move the minds that markets time. So with that, guys, I'm gonna dip, and I'm gonna see what's cracking out there in other spots. But thank you everyone that rolled through today. Big shout out to Jew Apparel. Big shout out to More Productions, Zachy, Professor Oak, everyone that rolled through. I do very much appreciate you, and more to come. And again, this is this an anything kind of vibe, but a lot of the time I'm going to spend my time talking about blockchain and cryptocurrency technologies because of what I just said at the end there, that I really believe that this might be the last peaceful free market solution, and it's beautiful, it's freedom, it's liberty, it's for the people, and we need folks that have been around, done the research, done the whatever, having these conversations and helping educate other folks. Because right now, a lot of people go, "Oh, isn't the Bitcoin? Isn't that some scam?" Because they associate it with like a Solana rug pull or something, whatever, or So it's important. It's important. So shout out to you. Shout out to community building. People are the power. Open source, unstoppable. Get yourself some Litecoin. Operation Litecoin, but again, not financial advice. Do your own research, entertainment, art, all that. Take care of yourselves and enjoy the fights tonight, man. I don't think Xander's ass is coming to lose. The more and more, man, I'm kind of thinking that might be the pick. But I think I'm gonna maybe cut some content on that by itself. So that's coming up. Cheers, guys. We'll catch you when I catch you.